All right. Greetings, folks. Sorry, you'd think this would all be set when I came live, but I was just putting up like an announcement, and it looks like this is not quite where we'd want it, huh? All right, so let me just get the info right here real quick. Title. Should be good, right? Unless there's like a typo in how I wrote the postmortem or something. All right. So this is a tournament that's being played online by dojoers over the course of April. 1 game per week. If anyone wants information about the tournament, you can find it in here. We've got Pleafers asking me to look at their game with Caitlin codes, I think. I know Far Eastern wants the game with Caitlin codes. Pleafers wants the game with Gauss Pi. And Chess in Black and White's got a game from today to look at as well. Destiny Dragon, you had a game today? Or recently? All right, let me see what I got here. Okay, cool, Seth. Yeah, we looked at your game for a good chunk. Saw some opening and some middle game. Douglas, round 2. Okay. So the first one I see here is Caitlin Codes versus Far Eastern here at the bottom. So I'm going to grab that one since I can see it. No, that's not what I want. Just want to grab the PGN. Go in here, live chess. All right. We got a game here of Far Eastern as Black against Caitlin Codes. Real life got in the way, huh? All right, let's see it. A3. Yeah, got to be prepared to trade if you play the Nimzo. Nice. Coming straight into the center. To contest. It's a good start. Yeah, this is a very valid opening so far. Okay, she tries to explode the center for her second bishop. That would be stuck in this pawn structure in some scenarios. My first instinct is that what you want to do here is just go straight to giving the opponent an isolated queen pawn. So basically like this position here. And then develop the bishop. and control d5. That's my first instinct for you here. But let's see. Oh, we got the opponent in the chat too. Yes, I am play first. I shouldn't even be nervous. The game's done and I didn't play it, but yeah. Okay, so knight to e4. I'm suspicious of that move for sure. But let's see. Okay. So all the pieces come out. Bishop's open. You're definitely prioritizing your development. I can tell that, Far Eastern. You're really trying to get all your pieces into good position. Absolutely, Daster. Good morning. Caitlin was worried about black playing c4 to lock things up if she didn't play c4. Yeah. Whoa. All right. Here's a big tactic. That's funny, Pleafers. Yeah, sometimes I do it when I'm cold. Sometimes I do it when I'm nervous. Sometimes I do it perhaps for no reason. Who knows? Okay, well this is a spicy move, you know, and you can see like black's fighting against the dark squared bishop. But if you just have the power of like having your rooks out first, you can play crazy moves like this. You know? If the knight takes, the queen's hanging. If the pawn takes, the queen's hanging. If the bishop takes, the rook takes, and still the pawn and knight can't take. Crazy. So h3, retreats, knight takes, queen takes, pawn takes. And here you're pretty much lost. So I think the exciting part of the game will be what we've already seen, but let me just check. Okay. So could the knight d4 move have led to something? I think the answer is it's like exciting and you can get away with playing it, but it's not actually good for you because after h3, you can't retreat the bishop without losing this piece. If you take here, then queen takes and black's still down a pawn. Rook's hanging, so we have to trade into the end game. Put the rook active for drawing chances, but white's a little bit better. So, like, exciting as it is, like, the result is you're going to scramble to draw a rook endgame down a pawn. And if we look at the position beforehand, you didn't have to, like, go down a pawn to begin with, right? Right, like here you could have traded the pawn, you could have protected the pawn. Play bishop g4. Yeah, maybe c4 because it keeps the bishop blocked and it keeps your pawn on the board. In the game, yeah, in the game, black could have taken the pawn here with the queen, probably not with the knight. If you guys see why not. Caitlin, of course, played the game, so she knows what she was hoping for. And somebody fell for this tactic today. At least one person in the classical tournament did fall for this. We saw a game decided by that. The game I'm thinking of, like, basically, like, Someone put their piece here, and like knight traded and queen took, and then there was bishop h7 at the end. So we've seen that decided game. But again, yeah, the queen could probably take here, and the game goes on. There's no compelling reason to sacrifice this pawn, unfortunately, despite the great activity black has, and you showed the power of those rooks, but it's not enough to really hurt white in any special way. So yeah, to me, this is a bit of an overplay. If you look at the position right now, development's like somewhere around equal, basically, right? So I don't think you really have the justification to sack a pawn in that case. I think c4 would have been the more prudent choice. And strategically speaking, it's kind of nice to leave the bishop on b2, biting on the d4 pawn for the moment. If you can maintain control over e4, which is not easy, not a given, but if you can maintain control over e4, then it would stand to reason that black would have a very good position, actually. I mean, I don't know if it's like a solid equal or like, you know, a little bit worse or a little bit better. But it feels like everything should be good with this move, right? Like white probably wants the bishop fighting for control of this square here. And then I don't think you want bishop g4 because you don't want to trade the bishop here, right? It's one of these examples. People have been asking me about this for a while. Like, I tend to put my bishop on this aggressive square and then it just sort of gets traded off. And why did I do that, right? Okay, Caitlin felt under pressure in the opening. So this kind of thing, you know, we've been talking about it quite a bit. It's not a move that's necessarily aggressive. It's a move that like looks at very likely trading this bishop for a knight or bishop on one of these squares. And it depends on so many factors whether pushing h3 and g4 can be good for white or not. But h3 looks fine for white here, so maybe it's more logical for black to play moves like bishop f5 and b5. And even then, you know, maybe the main plan for white is knight e1 f3, and what black wants to do is play this and put the bishop here. And the reason would be to play like f5, so that even on f3, you can maybe stop the move e4. And then play bishop b7. Because white's position kind of lives and dies by this e4 move. That's what's going to free this bishop and free the center majority. A plan for black could be a rook lift. I mean, I don't think that black has an advantage on the king side. White's got a very, very significant and healthy pawn structure there. Black's got a 3-on-1 majority here, and white's got a 2-on-0 majority in the center. So the plan is either like smush white with your pawns before white can do anything, or restrain white from playing f3, e4 yourself, right? So the prophylactic approach of preventing e4 by any means you can, I think, is what makes most sense. So I really like this idea of playing like blockading style, c4, f5, and notice. Okay, notice I'm weakening my dark squares horribly as black here, right? I mean, I've just completely given them up. I'm putting all my pawns on light squares, the same color as my bishop. It's kind of like the opposite of what you most often see. But if I can keep this, if this bishop gets out, I'm going to pay for it. Like if you put this bishop on, you know, f4 or something, oh la la. But if I can keep it locked in and I can actually prevent white from breaking free at all, then this can be a really strong idea for black. Sorry, that's just a misclick. You knew you could go for like the IQP, right? So like in a position like this where I suggested maybe instead of knight e4, make the trade, and play against the IQP, right? Takes here. Looks highly playable for black. Knight e4. It's the second move with the piece. It's very, very committal to do something like that this early as black. That said, Caitlin's cd5 is what allows the move c4. I think this opening is very, very intense and interesting. And normally for players at your rating, I wouldn't go into like super detail about the plans like this, because you would have hung like 3 pieces in the game and we would talk about, you know, your calculation skills. But here I think actually it's like it doesn't make any sense, but it's these opening decisions that really played a big role in how the game went. So every week, players are getting better and better. There's like rating deflation nonstop. You know, I mean, to be looking at, I mean, Far Eastern, I don't know what your rating is right now, but I remember seeing you play in a tournament a couple weeks ago and you were rated like 670 or 730, something like that. And that, I mean, it just makes no sense. I knew a player rated 670 OTB like 20 years ago. And my friend, my friend who wasn't that good got into an endgame against the 670 player, and he had like a king, a bishop, and a pawn, and the 670 player had like 7 different pieces. You just imagine like a collection of pieces. And the player with the king, bishop, and pawn got checked around the board in circles, never mated by like a queen, a rook, you know, 3 knights, 7 pawns, and slowly got chased around the board until his king had captured every single piece that the 670 player had. And then he queened his last pawn and won the game. So that's like what I thought like a 670 player was, you know? And now I'm seeing players, it's like, what, your game has like maybe 1 tactical inaccuracy and like a master level like Nimzo Indian where we need to discuss like the details of whether you should play for like a light square blockade or an IQP. It's really hard for me to adjust to this. The degree of rating deflation is just mind-boggling. I mean, how good people are. Right. Yeah, it's hard to know exactly where you are, but nothing like what I think of for 600. And that was like a classical OTB tournament. That wasn't like a blitz game or anything. This story I'm telling you. So takes. Okay, so let me try and give an advice to Caitlin on this opening, maybe. Just as Black wants to keep Caitlin's bishop down, Caitlin wants to get this bishop into the game. That's it. That's all Caitlin really needs to do. So, I mean, one idea would be a4, bishop a3. You can move the knight to play f3 and e4, but at this point, without the pieces being developed, it's really artificial to play some kind of retreating move with the knight, right? You play something really retreaty, and Black just advances in the center, and you can't take advantage of it because now you're behind in development. So yeah, you've got the bishop pair. Yeah, there's enough pawn tension that your bishop will be getting out now, but the Black knights are going to be established on great squares in the center after these pawns trade. Your bishop pair won't be an advantage. So we can't do something like super artificial like knight e1 or knight d2 here. We need to keep developing at the same time as we think about this bishop. So we could go for a4, bishop a3. a4 is a little bit of a tempo waste, but it slightly increases this rook's scope and definitely the bishop's scope. Or we can play a move like queen e2, you know, rook d1, just putting more, or queen c2. You know, just sort of like developing those pieces as well as we can. You could play a move like rook to b1, restraining Black from developing the bishop this way. And if they play b6, then when you trade, you don't just get like 3 isolated pawns that they pick up, but, you know, they would have to trade back. And then you can trade again, and you can push again. And anyway, you can get your pieces out that way. Bishop b2 just sitting behind these pawn chain could be playable as well. Yeah. But I think this cd5 move is probably slightly... I mean, this is so hard. This is like actually above my pay grade now. But I'll just give you my opinion, right? So Caitlin, Far Eastern, everybody else, I'm not confident about this, okay? It's just one person's opinion that can maybe gradually help you to form your own opinion as you gather more experience, okay? But my sense is that this trade here is already okay from Black's perspective to see here, because it's increasing their ability to control this light square by opening the rook and opening the bishop, which could go to g4, h5, g6, or, you know, in some cases somehow get to f5. So it might just be opening theory, but my instinct would be to play something like queen c2 here. And I understand that when we don't trade here, Black has a similar plan where they trade, and play e5 themselves, right? Letting the bishop out and putting all this pressure here. But here, at least, I'm happy with the tempo I've spent. Let me say that, right? Like, Black had to spend the time trading and pushing instead of me trading and trading off their e6 pawn for them. So I got one extra tempo move. And I could play rook d1 here to fight for the tension some more. I could look at knight g5, make Black defend this in case that's awkward for Black. Yeah, my instinct here would be to now play rook d1 as well. Then I'm kind of expecting Black to play queen c7. I don't know the opening theory. I just know that, like, you know, I've seen some of the ideas, but I haven't played a lot of Nimzo, so I don't know exactly in which position which move is right. I like the idea of playing queen c2, rook d1. I appreciate the bishop b2 might be playable as well. I'm fairly confident you can't play an artificial knight move. Rook b1 and a4 have an outside chance of being playable as well. Yeah, rook d1 is anticipating, like, this could be an example of it, right? Here, 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 rook d1, right? What is it doing? Well, it's anticipating the opponent might trade a bunch of times, and then I'll at least be defending this pawn. Or it could be threatening to take, to force Black to some kind of decision, or it could be threatening to push ahead, depending on what Black does. Like in this line here, maybe you could play d5, right? Knight b8, e4, and then you got your bishop out, and you got some hefty space advantage in the meantime, right? Maybe positions where you could play d5 like that, right? And, you know, here, any position like this, I feel like the rook's got some decent prospects on this file. Like, even if your opponent plays e4, you've got this option of knight e5, which before you would have had to play knight g5. Not that that's terrible, right? But now you've got knight e5 because of this. So, yeah, I think the rook... I know it's a little bit committal to move the rook now when this rook might want to go there and you might want a second rook on e1, but given that the bishop on c1 doesn't have a good move, this seems to add a fair amount of power to the game and give you new options as far as like pushing and trading and how to respond to the opponent trading. So I can see the rook doing pretty reasonable work here for white at this point here. Yeah, so, I mean, that's one thought of how I might approach this as white, and just showing you a couple of the ideas that white and black can each toss back and forth. at each other. I mean, I am a little bit like, I lean a little bit in the direction of development a little bit more than some D4 players. So, you know, D4 players, you'll see more tolerance for playing moves like A4 and stuff. Or even like some knight repositioning here. But given that black still has the option of like going for like a very open center, I think we need to keep developing here. Queen e2 puts our queen opposite this rook. So that's why I went for queen c2 in the line I showed you, but it might be possible to play the other way as well. And this position here, if you just trade everything, I don't love this position here. This position here I would love if our pawn were on, you know, e4, and we could play like f3 and bring out the bishop to f4, or e3 or g5 or anywhere. But if I'm not certain that I'm getting in this e4 move quickly, then I don't know if I like this position. As I say all that, I realize white could play f3 here. And yet I've got this nagging feeling like black's going to do something before I achieve what I want. But I don't see what it is. If I can play e4, I'm very, very happy with white's position here. Okay. Yeah, so Caitlin's saying she also likes the idea of getting the queen off of here. A lot of what she didn't like that was going on in the opening involved the queen being stuck here. So she might like this too. You know, that's weird. D5, knight e5. This is a big question, folks. If we can play e4, it's amazing. I don't see how black stops it, actually. Where is white going to get attacked before completing this and this? A6, b5? I think a4 probably stops that more or less. Does anybody know why my instinct is that this is loose for white and it's not quite going to work out? Bishop f5, e4. Bishop e6, trading off the bishop pair. Well, this maybe breaks up white's bishop pair. Unless we just say bishop pair. We lose even more time. Now the rook's kind of on a weird spot. Here, rook b1. Yeah, Dritman, I popped on stream today and saw you guys looking at Reti Alyechin on stream. You were looking at the move rook e3. Genius move from Alyechin. Someone told you it was their game? I was watching the kids, but I like walked by the stream for 1 second and saw that position. Saw you guys were looking at Reti Alyechin. And I didn't have time to pop into chat and be like, "Oh, I love that game." Yeah, black may need something like a sacrifice here. But, I mean, there's just no reason to think it would work, is there? White's position is like pretty pristine. Queen b3, bishop here, takes, here, resign. Huh. That's pretty crazy. Caitlin and Far Eastern, you two taking note of this? It's weirdly... And I don't know if you realize how bad it's going to be for black if I get to play e4 and black doesn't do anything, but let me just try and like give you an example. Let me just give you a position. I get out of the way of bishop f4. This position here is really, really bad for black. The knight doesn't have a good stable outpost anywhere in the center. White's got a kingside pawn majority that can gradually advance and a bishop pair on an open board. Yeah, it's a little bit over my head too, Far Eastern. It's, I don't know. This position would be really bad. So the question is, like, can white actually get away with trading everything and then playing f3 just to play e4? It's so slow, but I don't see it for black. Yeah, like really, really something, Schlechter, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the first thing that you need to know about any position like this is like why this is like that this position here is really bad for black. We could ask the chess.com computer; it probably even knows. Look at that, +1 it thinks in just some like random position with equal material. So this position is an example where the knight is just going to suffer like crazy, and this piece, like it can go anywhere and everywhere. This pawn's a target, but if you move it, the bishop goes to d4 and you die. If you try and defend it with b6, there's always a5. And eventually white just expands these pawns. White can also just put rooks on the d file. White can win the endgames. Yeah, and basically, like, a key thing to see here is there's not really counterplay. Like, there's sort of nothing black can do. So that's the first thing to know, is just that exists as a position that black would really suffer in. And then we can, ask ourselves questions of, like, what can black do as white's trying to play e4? Okay, Cookie Q asking, like, is there a way where you play for, like, c4 and then knight d7 to c5 to b3? Which definitely makes sense. That's at least something to do. My concern is that even once the knight's on b3, the bishop on d4 could just move to another square. That's the problem. And then your knight on b3 is, like, very much, like, committed, right? Because it's a slow piece. So this bishop's just going to run circles around the knight, even when it goes to b3. The bishop will just find somewhere else to go. And it won't really change the feel of the game. So, yeah, it's a cool idea, but it won't matter. Basically, this knight can never, like, track the bishop. It just can't keep up with it. The bishop's got too many good squares for the knight to try and deny many of them. Rook trades still leave white with a good advantage, but also since the bishops cover every single penetration point, like, white doesn't have to trade rooks if they don't want to. They can play rook ae1 and just push everything. So this position is just, like, bluntly bad. And to really know that, I mean, you need to actually, like, play positions like this, not just believe me. Just hearing a master tell you, like, a certain position is good or bad, I don't think you're going to, like, feel it till you've, like, played a game with that kind of a position. But anyway, you've heard it once here. We'll see. Some people may learn that way. Some people may just be like, okay, noted. If my knight's got no toehold in the center, if white's got this healthy pawn majority on the king side and just clean bishop pair, this is an example where I don't have a counterplay. Maybe. Other people will need to see it. Like me, I would need to see it. I would need to see a couple of games. So, so that's another approach that white could use, actually. Kind of interesting, huh? Just trade off. That said, I mean, rook d1 looked pretty nice to me too right here. I like white's position if black trades everything on d4. I like white's position if white plays d5. So I feel pretty good about this too. White can play g4 in those positions, Daster, for sure. Very good approach, Far Eastern. As recommended in a video I saw or recorded somewhere. Okay, so, and somebody asked if queen c2 was maybe about like pressure on the h7 pawn. And, well, I mean, certainly the queen eyes that square, and there are tactics at times around knight g5, or you could like trade in the center and the knight can't move away and stuff like that. But, I mean, white doesn't have a consistent plan of applying pressure here. It's just like tactically incidental. The main point of this is to free the rook, to get the queen off of like one of the files and instead have a rook there, and to get the queen in touch with the bishop and out of the way of the rooks. It's just kind of like a little coordination move, right? It's not about any one particular square that white's focusing at this point with the queen. Yeah, the battery happens to be there, but is by no means the point. Okay. Well, I did not expect this game to push me so far into my knowledge or not knowledge of the Nimzo Indian. Yeah. So I'm a little suspicious of this approach. I offer black two suggestions. One would be in this position, here, trading to the IQP position, followed by bishop e6 to control d5. And my second suggestion for black would be in this kind of position to play c4. And after black plays knight e4, I would suggest that even here, cd5, queen d5, allowing the c4 move was maybe annoying. Maybe even here we should still play queen c2 for white. Maybe still queen c2 here might be best. Oh, Pleefers, sorry. Chess lingo. Isolated queen pawn. Yeah. This pawn structure here is largely defined by the isolated queen pawn. Therefore, people study games that have isolated queen pawns. They have certain typical characteristics. And they study those, and then it informs their play when they reach a position like this. Yeah, the pawn structure in the center is often very like deterministic of how a chess game gets played. So you see me developing the bishop to challenge this one and control d5. That's a typical play against an IQP. And Daster's dropping some more general knowledge about how IQPs play. All right. That was pretty insane. The level of that game. Congrats to you both. Now, let's grab our next game. So we had chess in black and white. We had Pleefers. I see chess in black and white. This game. Where's Pleefers' game? Pleafer's game is with Scorton. Is that right, Pleafer's? No, your game with Gauss Pie. So that's your first round game, Pleafer's, huh? Okay, okay. Let me go find that. That can be correct, Aster, to try and trade the IQP by pushing it. Absolutely. The most depressing stream ever. What makes this the most depressing stream? My room is gray and there's no background music. And I don't talk as much. Huh. Interesting. My room's not like 100% gray. There's some chess books here and then a chess painting over there. But I guess largely gray. Definitely I don't like to play music. Why would I, talk over music and stuff? I figure you put on music if you don't have anything that good to say. The paint is definitely gray. That's true. Books back here. No, that's fine. That's fine, guys. We'll do like a 10-second interruption, then get back to analyzing. All right, I've got Imagination in Chess by Pata Gaprindashvili. My Most Memorable Games by Gelfond. Sam Shanklin's 2 books about pawns. Small Steps to Giant Improvement and Small Steps to Success. A volume of My Great Predecessors by Kasparov about Bobby Fischer. Endgame Challenge, a collection of endgame studies that are like insanely difficult from John Nunn. The volume of Night Endgames by Averbach that I'm studying. Grandmaster Preparation by Lev Pologaevsky, one of the first books that inspired me to be into chess. And 2 or 3 other little books there that aren't particularly good. I've got some other good books downstairs. When Kostya streams, there's often music, yeah. Yeah, cookie, coo, cookie, coo, coo, cookie. There's one room upstairs in this house, so it's the furthest away from all the other rooms. Yeah, I'm on a very high level. I'm on the 2nd floor here. Huh? What's Morphe fan talking about? Oh, some game he played with Kostya. All right. All right. Let's get to the beginning of this game, and then let's get to the bottom of this game. Please, you got any particular question about some part of the game? I'm going to do a quick playthrough, and then we'll go back to 1 or 2 questions you have or moments you want to ask about. Whoa. Immediate action. Wow, what a fight. I was half expecting this bishop to come to f4 now. Okay, but bishop t2 is threatening as well. Yikes. They're going at it. c2. He's getting hurt. Queen bops back out. Terrible two steps to a4. Gets trapped. GG. Doesn't take the knight. Oops. Yeah, you missed this. Could you still have won after this? Maybe. We'll see. I mean, you're still up a pawn. Your position looks fine. Good. You kept the bishop pair. Okay, now he dealt with that. Or she or they. C5. I think this lets the pawn on b5 go. That should be the end of your advantage, more or less, if white captures your extra pawn. Ooh, back rank. Tricky, tricky. Ooh, tricky, tricky. Hang on. Very tricky. Hey, you're up a pawn again. Oh, I guess that's because white didn't take on b5. Rook takes c3 here? Yeah. Draw. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, the most important moment in this entire game is when you didn't take this knight. That's something you really got to ask yourself why you didn't take that knight. You got to go deep inside yourself on that one. Because I can't guess it right here. Just looking at this position, I can't guess why you did not take the knight. Try and look at the time police spent on the move. I suppose we could, yeah. He could go for g7, and then the rook was trapped. Oh, wow, you considered it and looked ahead to this and didn't think that you'd have a defense to it? Yeah. Yeah, so, wow, almost like looking ahead too much or something. Yeah, you won't lose the rook. You can move the knight here or the pawn here. You can move the pawn here and let him take the pawn and still escape with your rook. Yeah. Yeah. So you can definitely deal with this here and take this. If you're not going to take it, you should definitely not let the knight take your pawn, right? So like c5 would be better than c6. That really gets white back into the game. So now you know, yeah. Okay, but knowing how you got it wrong is important, because now from that you can figure out like what kind of exercise you could do to have that not happen again, right? So the kind of mistake you made was you could take something, but you looked further ahead than most people would, came up with something that scared you, and didn't follow through on what you wanted, right? So do you have an instinct about... Did you have an instinct that pawn takes knight would or wouldn't work? I mean, it's basically just capturing a piece with a pawn in the center. That's basically always going to work. Yeah, seeing ghosts is a thing. Lots of people have it. Yeah, it's not the most common thing, but it's common enough that I've seen many people dealing with that. Look for a better move. There's always better. Yeah. I don't understand how the word gaslights is being used these days anymore. But you should not always look for a better move. That like famous quote about like if you see a good move, wait, look for a better one is not always true. I think that thing is messing with a lot of people, if that's what you mean. Often there isn't a better move. Often you're not going to find a better move. Often you don't have the time to spend on it. it matters a lot if the move that you're looking at is good enough for you to win the game. And as Kosya says, once you find the better move, do you look for a better move and then a better move? Yeah. Reminds me of when Flight of the Conchords are like, and then their kids are going to have kids, and then their kids' kids are going to have kids. I mean, aren't our kids' kids too small to be having kids? Where does it end? Yeah. So you just sit there and never move until you find a mate in one is the logical conclusion from Daster. Yeah. So, okay. So anyway, yeah. So let's take some of that pressure off yourself about you always have to find a better move. If you've got a pawn that can take a minor piece around move 10, it's typically your best move. Just stop blundering pieces. Fair enough. I understand that sometimes it's hard to guess why a student is blundering pieces or not taking pieces. And so in frustration, a teacher could just say like, will you just stop blundering pieces? And it's like, well, that's not actually that helpful, unfortunately. It's partly true, like it's all they need to do, but it also doesn't necessarily help them to tell them that. Some people does. Some people don't yet realize that just having more or less pieces is deciding 90% of chess games. Yeah, not taking a piece is the same as blundering a piece. Same effect on the game. I think maybe, Pleafers, what could help you a little bit is to have some kind of like sense of what is or isn't plausible. You know, so like for me, if we're in this kind of a position and I've got the option of pawn takes knight, well, what kind of a move would be better than a pawn takes knight move? Well, I mean, like capturing like the queen or checkmating the king or capturing a rook, right? Well, their queen is gone. Their rooks are safely in the corners, right? And I don't have enough pieces developed to checkmate their king. So I know there's no better move. Like immediately, right? I know that there's not going to be a better move. Like there's nothing better you can do early on in the game than capture one of your opponent's pieces with a pawn. Like, I mean, there'd have to be a very, very specific circumstance that would raise your eyebrows where you could be hoping for more than pawn takes a piece, right? Then there's another question. What about the opponent's counterplay? Like, can you deal with that or not? And I'm going to say that counterplay, the instinct should be it's very easy to deal with it. Like, if you get a whole move to deal with that threat, you're going to find some way to save your rook. Maybe you'll have to drop the pawn or, like, play one move you don't like a retreat or get a doubled pawn or something. But worst case, you could lose this pawn, and even that is, like, implausible. Like, how many pieces does your opponent have, like, out and attacking? It's almost like no scenarios where you're just going to lose a rook when your opponent's got just one piece like playing against your army, right? So it's very, very implausible. And to show you how implausible it is, why don't you list for me every possible defense black has to bishop winning the rook, okay? So you're allowed to lose your g-pawn, but you're not allowed to lose your rook. Why don't you list for me every move black has that saves the rook? Let's not count bishop e5, because after bishop takes bishop, you're just facing down the same problem without a piece. So, Dasser sees 2. Cookie Coo sees 7. Chess in black and white sees 6+. Thought of 2 intuitively, now you're seeing 4. Cannibals got 6. Yeah. Castling queenside, how does that save the rook? That one's weird to me, castles queenside. Is it bishop b4 check? Oh my lord. Is that your plan? That's amazing. Wow. I didn't even see that defense. That's another nice one. Then king here, check, king here, takes. And although the rook is trapped, you win back enough material for black to still be completely winning. If the bishop c3 interposes, then of course you've also saved the rook on h8. Man, somebody worked hard on this position. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Okay, and perhaps rook d8 achieves the same thing pretty much. Where after bishop takes here, you can do this. Man, we've got some people with their tactical swords out today. Well, hits crits, why don't you like wait 1 second to try and conclude for yourself if he's looking at the chat, huh? You can answer so many of your own questions if you just try. Yeah, there's no way the engine's going to say that the best thing black can do is allow bishop takes g7 because of bishop b4, bishop f1, but technically it leaves black ahead material. Technically leaves black ahead material. All right, so here are the simple ones. f6, knight f6, knight e7, right? So 2 moves that block the g7 pawn. Knight e7 allows bishop g7, rook g8. King f8, bishop f8. 2 moves that just defend the g7 pawn and say, sorry, up a piece. h6 and h5. 2 moves that let the rook escape after bishop takes g7 by going to h7. So on top of that, apparently we've got castles queenside and rook d8. Right? So, yeah, that position's winning for black. Cannibal bishop after knight d4. Yeah, black's still winning there. But knight d4 is a very nice try. I like it. Knight h6 allows the rook to escape, but I wasn't really going to count it because you lose back a full piece and a pawn. Like, the position's not really good at the end, right? So I saw it, but I wasn't really going to count it because it just loses a piece and a pawn, which is a bit much. Okay, so does that give us a sense of how unrealistic it is that black wouldn't be able to stop this threat? We've got 7 obvious moves that deal with g7 and 2 insane indirect tactical moves that deal with bishop g7. Right? So what that's telling you, Pleafers, is that your fear... That's telling you that your fear is completely irrational, basically, right? It's telling you it's like so easy to stop this bishop g7 move, right? That it's just completely completely not a factor. I'm sorry, I'm losing my words. Right? We're trying to assess what is plausible, what's realistic in these kind of positions, right? Is it plausible that someone has something better than pawn takes knight at this point? No, there's no reason to look for a better move because like there's nothing at stake that could be worth more than that, right? How plausible is it to worry about bishop takes g7 that you won't find a defense to it? Not plausible either, right? So that's very important to have that sense of what is or isn't going to work. Right, like what Daster voted in that Twitter poll. Yeah, okay, somebody wants to see it one more time. We'll do them a favor since they're new here. Castles queenside looks like absolutely insane. Even after somebody told me this, it took me like 3 seconds to realize why they were saying it. And the point here is to play bishop b4 check, which the bishop on c3 was guarding. The bishop here is trapping the king from tucking. If the bishop goes back, then of course your rook is safe. If the knight blocks, then you can just move this bishop somewhere and win this knight. And not only that, probably like trap this bishop in here as well. So you can play something like, you know, here, I guess, might be even the most evil. And then after something like this, you'd have check, here, check. After king here, the variation goes bishop check to f1 from the rook, and then the bishop slinks into g2. Like this, hitting these pieces. Black comes out with enough material to win. Yeah, it's completely nuts. Somebody in chat mentioned that this move would be pretty cool from white in this position. But it should still not work out for white somehow. So, yeah. I mean, it's a nutso position. But some trade-off of trades and bringing out pieces should not work. And we get this guy, maybe. Something like that. Bishop c2 specifically says coup cookie. All right. So it's total insanity that castles queenside works too. But it's also insanity to think that this is going to be a problem for black. Right? What's that hits? An engine line, what to do against knight d4. I have no idea. I don't have the time to figure this line out. I just played some random moves there. Because it's just too gnarly for me. I would never see castles queenside, honestly. When I'm up a piece, I just play simple moves like king f8. You know, I defend my pawn. I don't look for like fancy engine moves. Can I go look how much time you spent on the moves? Sure, that could be cool to see. Let's see what you did with your time on this game here. So this was from like a week ago. So I'm gonna have to go into your archive just a little bit. Live games, rapid search. Now we're just going to search for 90s. So here's 190, here's another 90, Gauss pi. So we can go check like how much time was spent on some of these choices. By the end of the game, you had 1 hour and 22 left. Yeah, so clearly you could have used more time if you wanted to. So we're here, check here, B5 in 1.5 minutes, and you spent 50 seconds on this. So, no, it's no problem, please. So if the concern was, you know, that pawn takes, bishop takes, that you're not going to be able to defend this, I mean, a piece is worth the effort of looking for that solution if you want. I wouldn't even look because I'd just be like, whatever, there's going to be a way out of it. But if you need to, that's what you've got this hour and 26 minutes for. I know you guys can't see it correctly in this screen capture at the moment, but Pleef's got 1 hour and 26 here. This is like the move that decided the game more than any other move in the entire game. And that's something that you'll start to get over time, Pleef, is like recognizing which moves are more or less important and then allocating more or less time to those moves, right? So a move that's likely to decide the game, you put more time into. A move that's not going to matter as far as winning or losing the game, you can put less time into. Right? So like, let's say once we get to this position here, and someone plays like rook e1, let's say you're choosing between rook d8 and rook e8, you might say to yourself, well, I'm going to play one, and next move I'm going to play the other, right? Like, it's not going to win or lose me the game, the order in which I play these two moves. My rooks are coming to the center files, just for example, right? And does it matter in which order you play them? Maybe, but by like this much, right? So you spend 30 seconds on the move. But at another time, when you're like looking at b5 trying to trap the knight, you're like, okay, if I just play a normal knight f6 developing in castle, I might have an okay position. And if I play b5, I might be up a knight. So understanding that move has like this really huge impact on the final result of the game. So this move is worth more of your time, right? So, and you found this one, but then you didn't follow up by capturing the knight. You got spooked, but then didn't put in the work to deal with being spooked, right? And I would suggest some kind of like work on some kind of plausibility instinct that tells you when you should or shouldn't be spooked, but also like when to put in the work. And if you are spooked, a natural option is to check the things you're afraid of and see if they're actually a reason to be afraid. That's right, Mark. Pleaf scared himself out of taking out of fear that the rook would be trapped and captured in 2 more moves from here. Yeah. So. Yeah. Now, at this level of this section here, a piece is not a 100% guarantee of winning the game, but a full piece, like a full knight up, is probably enough to start moving the needle on like the percentage chance that you win the game, right? From let's say like 50-50-ish, it might move it all the way to like 65-35 or something like that. It's really, really significant, the impact of this on your eventual result. So. Idle player. Why was I surprised by it? It seemed very aggressive. I didn't see it coming at all. Perhaps I'd been lulled by how many times the knights moved back and forth. Also, that moment I played through very, very quickly. But yeah, I just wasn't expecting it. Is f6 playable here? Yeah, hits crits. f6 is much more playable than castles queenside. Much more obvious. I would play king f8 probably, or f6. Those are like the most likely moves for me. Knight f6, fine as well, because who cares if they trade their bishop for your knight? Just makes it easier to win. So. We're not here to yell at you, please. Nobody's here to yell at you. Just trying to offer some, useful advice. What looks like idle player is in the chat, Daster. So if idle player wants us to go over that game, we could, and then you'll get to see the end of it. That's totally reasonable. It's Joshua XP. That's mostly what I recommend to a newer player, is to just play and play. And 1,006 months is probably about average. I would say you are neither, chess-wise disabled or challenged, nor are you a mind-blowing prodigy based on that performance. All right. So, I think that's really like the crux of this game. And we're going to grab that PGN there, save it into the file from the postmortem, and move on to the next person's game. There's a lot of games getting played in this tournament. A lot of people here. That's right. If you amass another 1,000 points in the next 6 months, then you will be the next coming of Magnus. All right. So, next game. Results round 2. What do we want to get into here? Asking me early on was chess in black and white, I think. So I'm going to go to that. Chess in black and white, Max Kroll. And as I start in on this game, chess in black and white, you can ask your questions about it as we do a playthrough here. Okay, how should white aim? What should white aim for as a plan here with this pawn on h5? I mean, for one thing, you have to always be ready that black could then castle kingside. He played h5 before you castled queenside, right? So you have the option here of then just castling kingside. Like switching up gears. He's already played a6, so you know he's going to play like a b5 Dragendorf kind of thing. I don't know the answer to this question offhand. Chess in black and white, I'm going to have to figure it out for myself. I'm going to play through the game and see if I have any thoughts about how it plays out, and then I'll try and come up with an answer. Okay. Oh, this is working out nicely for you. Wow. Queen a5 is already winning, but you go for lots of pieces, which makes sense. The opponent's in trouble, but does break your dark squares. Yeah. Okay, so basically, yeah, you're winning at this point, but what's the best way to do it? Just coming through the E file. This all looks really clean. I mean, I like everything you've done here so far. Oh, yeah, this is just completely over. No, you handled this all just fine. So let's just look at what an opening plan would be. I think that part there, just doubling rooks on the E file, taking on E7, you just attacked one thing after the next logically and played for positions where your rooks were useful. So I think that was just really, really, really well done. Rook to the E file, knight going for E7. You just aim everything at E7. And then next you're going for F7 and B7. Check, and then pick up this piece. Yeah, and I saw the kill from here. It was very clinical as well. So the only real question is, how should one play against this h5 move? One thought is that this would be a great position to put your bishop on b3. You have that option before b5 comes in. The d5 square is going to be a bit weak. With this many pawn moves, you're less likely to see e6, so your bishop's likely to be pretty good on b3. I think that'll be a strong square for the piece, whether black keeps the king in the center or castles. So I like the idea of developing this piece to its best square. I know that's not a full plan, but that's my first observation here from an opening perspective. It makes no sense not to seize upon this. I know that there's plans in the Dragon where people play rook c8, knight c6, knight e5, knight c4, and then you have to trade your bishop for that knight. And I also like to save time, leaving my bishop on f1 and just take after they do that whole maneuver. But here, it looks like your opponent's going to play b5. So I don't see that like knight e5 and quick rook c8 plan coming. Realize they also spend a tempo on h5. They're also probably spending tempo on these moves. So I think your bishop on b3 is going to be pretty safe and going to help you hold together the queen side. Also, I think there's a chance you might want to castle kingside, but let's put the bishop on b3 first and only then decide. Okay? For the moment, it's just placing this piece on the best square. That much is clear to me, actually. I think that's got to be correct. So let's say you do this, and your opponent plays sort of like in the game, which would be b5 here, bishop b7, just for argument's sake. So let's imagine we get this position here. If they play a super early b5 in the Sicilian, one thing you can sometimes do is play a4. This is not as good with your king on the queen side, right? You play a4. You crack this square. They play here. Now you do this. So now you get like, knight takes, pawn takes. Your opponent's struggling to hold this pawn here. Maybe a5 to do it. Now the whole queenside is locked, and you can switch back to castling queenside, right? If your opponent had let you take on b5 or taken on a4, then you could just switch to castling kingside. You've got a massive plan on the queen side that's opened up because you've got this nice development lead, right? Your opponent's played h5, a6, and you're so far ahead. But if they lock up the whole position, now you could consider like queenside castling again. The most obvious plan now is to go after e7. And to keep in mind that whenever this knight develops, you just plunk a knight on c6. Right? And they're just going to die on the center files before they can collect your c6 pawn in basically any scenario here. There's also no need to castle queenside. You could castle kingside too. The plan is just to attack this pawn, I think. Well, why not castle queenside? It puts one rook on the center faster. And if your opponent castles kingside, you can play g4 in one move since there isn't a knight here anymore. Why not do this? This move hurts them. They're probably playing h4, and then, when you go after the e pawn, which is your main plan anyway, then this pawn will just be incidentally hanging. And, right, anytime this comes out, you just plop this here. Maybe I'm blundering things. I don't know. I haven't been watching chat carefully. I've just been looking at the position and giving you some ideas that I see. That's kind of how I would probably lay out the game. Like, you can also just castle kingside, play rook e1, bishop g5, right? But I feel like castling queenside only gives you extra play, in my opinion here. Because it gives you this extra move, and it gives you this little extra juice on the central file. Now, if I don't castle kingside for black, that would be the other branch, right? So he develops the knight. We plop this here. Takes. Now, if knight c5, you're just taking it. You're going for opposite colored bishops. And, let's see. Does the move queen f4 win the game? There's bishop h6, I guess. Hang on. Am I allowing bishop h6 already? No, not till I trade it. Okay. So queen f4, bishop h6 could be a mistake. What about bishop f7? How does that play out? Yeah, wherever the king goes, this will be check, and you'll have time to move your king off of here. Right? So this actually wins. In this order, I think. I mean, it's by far not the only approach to a position like this. For your information, if you had to, you could play queen d7 and win this endgame. Well, maybe win's a bit strong, but you'd be like in really good shape in this endgame. Right? Queen takes, pawn takes. If king moves, it's back rank mate. So king here, you grab this pawn. right? I mean, it doesn't. You don't really want to go to an endgame, but this should be winning. I think the bishop f7 is just a tactical knockout. So that's good enough. More likely, the opponent's playing knight to e5 here. Now, my theory was before they can clean up this pawn, we're going to do something violent. And I think f4 is a good start. Right here, that clears the e file. And the knight can't go here because of queen d5. Unless I'm miscalculating, in which case, you guys can speak up. But I think we're going to see knight g4 here. I kind of just want to like break with f5, but I should just develop this rook instead. Why don't we need king b1 as much here? I don't know. I'm just developing pieces with like a lot of impact. Also, because black doesn't have like knight takes e4 shots, rook takes c3 shots, there's just not counterplay from black here, so it doesn't matter as much. You could play king b1 at some point if there's a specific bishop h6 tactic, but you don't like generally need king b1 here. You generally need like power this way. So black can go to opposite colored bishops here if they want to. Bishop f6 maybe. Queen e4. I'm both making it hard for black to castle kingside because of queen g6, and if they don't castle, I'm preparing c7 and queen c6. Yeah. White's position looks good to me. It might be worth it to keep the bishop away from this knight. It's not a great knight. I just didn't have a great move for the bishop. I guess it depends whether or not this is a good trade for me. After this, knight's coming here. I guess I'll chase it here and then sack a pawn. Yeah. This is good too. You can play this way if you want as well. Okay, you're saying h3, g4. You know it too. This is perfectly good. The knight can't compete. I've got this pawn hanging on c6 still. Hopefully, some of you watching are feeling that this doesn't matter. That there's just no time in the position for this to become a problem. White's just got big, like bone-crunching, cracking moves going on the king side here. And the bishop's scope and impact here is not being matched. So I think I could do pretty well in the opposite colored bishop position I played first here. But I also think that that this bishop d4 move looked winning for white as well, pretty much. Seems like with h5 you should be willing to play on the queen side more. You don't have to win on the king side. You should definitely be flexible because you don't yet know if they're kings on that side, right? I mean, the first thing you have to realize is you have to position your bishop well. And that may seem like a little thing, but notice the direction of my thought process. Whether it's right or wrong, it is like a slightly higher rated thought process, right? Than the other people here right now, since we don't have a super GM around to help us out. My thought process starts with placing this bishop correctly. That's where it starts. And that may seem just like a little detail. But did you see how often that bishop ended up being like great here? And how it was like sort of like in many cases like a driving force behind my advantage? The bishop f7 check knockout in some lines. The whole idea of just plopping the piece on c6. Being able to crack black's kingside at some point with g4, even without any preparatory moves. If you try to set up g4 here yourself, when the opponent's got it covered a million times and their king's not on the king side, right? If you start playing moves like h3, h4, or bishop e2, rook g1, your opponent can see it coming. They can either like stop it and take the pawn, or like let you do it and like dodge it and it not hurt, right? But if we try and maximize the activity of your pieces, then when your opponent fights with you, then at some point we randomly play g4 without any prep, right? We managed to play g4 without ever preparing it in several positions. Like, we're just sitting around, we're like, oh, you know what? We could just play g4 now. And then it's like, oh, black really wishes their pawn were back on h7, right? You saw this one here, right? Randomly g4, and black was like playing h4, losing a tempo and eventually losing that pawn for sure, right? That's like losing a tempo in order to do a pawn sack. So this position here, black was like wishing they could play h7, right? h5 to h7. And then this variation here, where I was like, I wonder if we could play this with that if we break up our bishop pair. And then it's like, oh yeah, we could just play h3, g4. Again, black's dead and they're wishing they could bring the pawn back. So we're really able to, instead of focusing on trying to play g4, if you just try to activate all your pieces nicely, it'll often like come to you at the right time. And as far as castling kingside or queenside, that really depends on how black plays the queenside. So even just the one extra move of information that this is giving us, right? We're seeing this. We're seeing, okay, if they're playing b5 this fast, I want to poke it. If they let me trade pawns, I'll castle kingside and win on the queenside. If they lock up the queenside, I'll castle queenside and then play to try and win in the center. And when they run to the kingside, you can randomly just play g4 as a pawn sack, it seems. And there's probably other ways for the opponent to play this kind of position. But like, let's say they play here. Might still be good to play a4 here. Let's try it out. Plop. This threatens knight c6, trapping the queen. You could take with the pawn or the bishop here, but let's try the bishop. It attacks the rook. I don't see any moves other than rook b8, rook a7, knight c6. We won the game by accident again. So, yeah. I mean, I think placing the piece on the active square was really critical. And not worrying so much about g4. I think knowing that g4 can come to you at some point is nice. Yeah. And like you, I don't play bishop c4 in the main line dragon usually. I love to just castle queenside on move 9, or even play 9 pawn to g4. In the Yugoslav attack, you probably play the same line, some of the same lines as me. But here, this is very nice. And could your opponent, after playing a6, now switch to, you know, knight c6 and rook here? Is there some worry that that might be the case? You want to check something like that. You can't go for this tactic here if knight takes an e5, because after bishop f7, king f7, the rook defends the queen. So you don't have a knockout on this move. So let's see, if we go here, bishop d7, this would be like the way they would play, right? Here, Should we castle queenside now? It's a big question, right? Because now black's playing for this rook c8 95 thing. I'm going to just try this anyway. This seems much better for black than what we did before. Much better for black than what we tried last time. I'm not feeling this for white. All right, let's go into the tank here, okay, folks? Let's think about this for a bit. Tuck the bishop on b3. Tuck the bishop on b3, bishop d7. So we know rook c8, 95 is kind of coming. What do we want to do as white here? I'm just going to think in my head for a second to stop staring at my screen. Okay. I'm thinking of maybe playing h3, f4, f5 here. Because this move here weakened this square. So if I play h3, rook c8, castles queenside. Often people will play h4 here to stop g4. But let's say he doesn't even have to. He just completely ignores it and plays here. And now, should I now play g4 since he allowed it? Or should I still go with f4, f5? Well, let's just try this. I know I said I was going to play f5. Yeah, castling kingside is a viable option as well here for sure, Oscar. Okay, so we're going to kick this piece here. Somewhere bad. Oh, yeah, I see everything we're going to do. This is going to work out. This is going to work out. So basically the knight's coming to one of these squares, right? And what we're going to do for white is we're just going to throw this pawn in here, right? And the opponent's going to take one way or another, and then we're going to play queen d3 and hit these two squares. And black's position is just going to be like a random bag of scattered pieces. Suddenly. Just out of the blue. Yeah. It went from like a position that made sense to just like a pile of rubble. Maybe trading once is a little bit messier. Because now on e6, bishop takes, the queen can trade. Right? And so this wouldn't work out easily for white here. So we might have to play queen d3 first. We'll hit the rook. And if the rook moves, we'll play e6, right? And now I imagine out of desperations, black's going to play rook takes c3. And hopefully you know that white's just very, very happy there, right? This is desperation. It's not something that threatens white at all. If you're black here, you should play rook c3 and you keep like a 10 or 15% chance at your rating level, chess in black and white. Maybe 15%. But it's just desperation. So there's another cool plan. f4 and e5. Even I didn't know we were going to play e5. I thought we were going to play f5. Just try and weaken this square a little bit. You know, the knight that could come to e5 is gone. We traded our light squared bishop, so we put our pawn structure on light squares. You can see like black's at some point going to run out of useful things to do without castling. If they ever castle, you can play that g4 like a pawn sack like we saw before, right? Meanwhile, you're threatening this. If they castle, you can also play bishop h6 in some cases to go after this square. Even if they don't castle, you might be able to play g4 as a pawn sack. You can play queen d3, hit the rook, and when it moves, play fg, e5, and win in the middle game. So that could be like a threat. Even queen here, like defending this in advance. You know, if white plays queen d3, they renew this threat of trades e5. And so now black's looking at, you know, sacking the exchange. Yeah, there's a bit of that chess in black and white. And we're also, I mean, we're not trying to like waste our time. You're trying to play really useful moves, right? But at some point, you know, a lot of these rook c3 sacrifices depend on the second rook coming to the c file. Right? It's like, well, we've got one file, we sack one, weaken the file, and then the other rook comes in, right? I mean, it is costing them something to their coordination to have this rook here. It's weirdly awkward for them to defend g6. Now, that said, this is only the second string in our bow, this f5 move. e5 was very, very convincing here. So... yeah. Okay. And that was even, you know, I didn't even try g4 here, which might be good too. Honestly, I didn't play it because I thought black could like trade and trade off their bad rook. And then just keep playing for trades and for trying to defend the position by trading material off. I'm not afraid of like an attack against my king here, just of like oversimplification and not having enough advantage to win the game for white. So that's why I went for f4. I want to leave the bad rook here for now. It seemed pretty effective that time. So there you go. Some group of ideas for playing this. Any questions about any of those ideas? Sure you will. It'll just be in another situation, chess in black and white. It'll just be in another situation that you'll get to do that. Playing good moves does not preclude you from getting to have nice flourishes at the end of your games. I've had some of my best flourishes come from good opening play. All right. Who's next then? Daster, Oscar Idle, Douglas is in the queue. That's right. All right. Let me see if I've got Douglas's game here. Okay, and Oscar and Daster. Okay, those will be the next two, Oscar and Daster after this one. Whoa. Sorry. Almost got stuck in a game. Yeah, even one question's enough, Daster. And it's just helpful for me to know where to focus. Given that, and also bear in mind that half the time I tell people that their question was wrong and give them a different point in the game to focus on, but then it's already like helpful for me to see where they think it's interesting to look at. Okay, so we get a symmetrical Grunfeld. Feels like black spent a lot of effort trading that knight. That's a weird spot. Fancy. These are some fancy pants players here. Bishop A1, Queen A1. Okay. Very, very fancy pants. Jeez. Right, knight has to take. Up a pawn. Go, pawn, go. Huh. Okay. Bishop C6 doesn't work here. Rook A6. Wow, eventually picks up the piece. Okay, and now white's up a piece. It's not easy to win it. Down to one pawn. Nice, nice. All right. All right. Douglas, what questions do you have on this game here? Yeah, the rook on a1 was hanging back at this point. Wow. Trading off here. So here you should be good. Bishop c6, you're worried about rook takes e2, huh? These guys are pretty high came to stunt. I think Douglas is like 2100 something, and the opponent's like 1980 or 90. So just about 2000. You struggled with this position here, huh? Yeah. It seems like critical because you came out of like a long forcing sequence in the opening. I mean, unless you guys blundered some like computer moves in that sequence, like you have to sort of be satisfied to come out with this extra pawn at this point, and then it's like a big question, like, now that you have this extra pawn, do you have a way of winning with it? Rook on a2 is pretty annoying. I mean, was there any other way this part plays out? What do you think your opponent does if you activate this rook here? I feel like when you play this tactical move hitting the bishop, you were starting to worry about how to defend this pawn. You didn't want to play bishop c6 because of this pawn. Also, you don't know how to move it because they've got this covered, but let's start by just getting active, right? Let's start by just getting active with this piece. And if they play bishop b4, at least you don't need to worry about rook b4 attacking this pawn anymore. If the opponent ever plays e6 to control your bishop, then you can double on the 7th very quickly and very effectively. Okay, so we get to here. And now I feel at least like your pawn's not being threatened, right? So it's a question of getting active and converting. This piece here is a problem. At some point, you may need to deal with it. This could make sense. e3, bishop e1 doesn't look good. And with the rook here, e3, rook here is problematic, right? So I think rook d7, bishop b4 here. I'm just going to defend this pawn with my king and consider repositioning this. The other thing you could do is you could throw in this h4 move here. This move is looking to play h5. In some case h6, in some case hg, because there's this tactic on bishop d5 and rook g6. All right, so here if h5, for example, white wins with this. So that's kind of like part of the justification. And if you can get this h-pawn up the board, it can help you in a lot of these endgames for white. So actually, I'll do this instead of king f1. It's just a little bit more helpful. I'll play h4. I think black's just going to play king g7 here. It stops h6, and it gets out of the way of some of these tactics. Not like absolutely every tactic, but some of them. So now I have to choose as white if I really want to play h5 or if I just want to improve my king. I think I want to play h5. I think that could only help me a little bit to have that tension, because black's like never going to want to trade, never going to want to push past, almost never. So I can just put that there and then leave it. I'm not looking to trade a pawn on g6, but I want this here. Now, for one thing, black needs some waiting moves now. Should the bishop come back to c5 or d6 or something, trying to set up rook b4 after all? It might let this pawn advance. Yeah, if I go a5, I'd probably lose it to the bishop coming back safely. That's an important point. Sorry, I'm going slow. It's like a lot to work through this position here. I think who's saying like if we go like a5, bishop here, rook here, then we're not going to be able to pose enough problems to black in this position here. And I would tend to agree that black's defensive task gets quite a bit easier here. So I'm not going to go for that with a5 for the moment. Hey, thanks for the raid, Benjamin. Much appreciated. Welcome, viewers. We are analyzing a game here. This whole show is analyzing viewer games, looking at viewer games from a classical tournament that we're running throughout the month of April. And it's one game a week. People get paired against somebody, and then they find them and play them at their own convenience that week. Yeah. And for any fans of Benjamin Box, please invite him on our behalf to this show here, The Gauntlet. Okay? We would love to have Benjamin on The Gauntlet. Let him know about it. You can read that info I just put in the chat. Invite him over. I think he would enjoy it and be a great possible collab here. And for my viewers who don't know Benjamin, I've seen him on his channel many times working through like really hard puzzles, tactical puzzles, explaining how he's working through them. So if you guys like working on long tactical puzzles, he was going for the puzzle survival record. You can give him a follow. Check out his stream on that link I sent up there. So there you go. I'll send it again, just because there were a few people coming in all at the same time here. So there's the link again. Yeah. And if you want information on the classical tournament, Introveric sent the link. I'll send that again as well. It's open to anybody. There's no entry fee. It's just chess for the sake of chess. So that could be cool. Right now we're looking at a game that Douglas and Julio played at the beginning of the week. This is round 2 for April. And we're just trying to figure out how to torture black. Just trying to figure out what are all the different little puzzles that white and black can pose for each other. Indeed, you can, Super Smart. Anybody can. You just go to the registration tab in that spreadsheet. I mean, first make sure that you want to play, like check the rules and the information about the event. And if it is an event that you would like to play in, then yeah, you can enter by just going and putting your information in the registration tab. All right, so we don't want to play a5 here yet. We could try to bother this bishop and make it go to d6 instead of c5. We could play king f1 and probably just get checked and come up and then they come back. It's all okay with me. Yeah, I think I'll start like that. Why not? Just slightly improve my king because I feel like it. And, well, we could do a lot of things for black, but we're not going to spend forever getting some moves in. So we'll go like this. Oh, you want to try rook b4? Okay, try rook b4. Okay, so that blocks the bishop from coming there for the moment. So is that my opportunity to try a5 after all? I don't have a lot of other choices here other than a5, really. Well, I can always hit that bishop with my rook, but I don't know what it's going to do. So I go a5. I wonder if you're going to play like some rook move now. Rook b5, you say, yeah. And then I can't really do anything. Yeah, nice. Okay, so bishop here, maybe rook b4 is a problem. Okay, I'm going to try another idea I had. I don't know if this does anything. It was just something else that was on my mind, Douglas. Was to overprotect the a-pawn with this rook sort of sideways. I know I wanted to be on the 7th rank, but now I came back. Yeah, as you say, at least we're stable for the moment. It frees either piece to do something at some point. One of my weird ideas, Douglas, would be to play rook h4, trying to really threaten to get this pawn here and take space away from the king. Yes, you would play someone around your rating, Chief Mortale. It's split into 5 different sections by rating. You can see that there are 5 different tabs for the pairings. So we had a turnout of like well over 100 players. That allowed us to make pretty narrow rating bands, which is cool. And you just go put your information in the registration tab. There's just a tab called registration. I don't know what else to tell you, super smart. This actually seems kind of annoying. I mean, it's the kind of move that I would like struggle to know exactly what to do against, right? If it were my game and somebody were playing like rook c4, rook h4 against me, I wouldn't know exactly what to do about it. You absolutely must play your opponent sometime during the week. Hits, crits, Chief Mortale, super smart chess player, anyone else considering joining the tournament. You must not leave your opponent without a game all week. That's the commitment, that you will find a time when you can play a nice, slow classical game with your opponent. Once we pair you Sunday night, you can withdraw for the next week, but you can't not play that week. You can withdraw at any point. You can only play one game if that's what you want. But once we pair you with somebody, please do not leave them stranded. The penalty will basically be that we don't let you play in our events in the future. Because the whole point of this is not to leave people stranded. We could avoid it by charging entry fees. We're trying not to do that. So if you sign up, just play your game. That's all we ask. This would annoy me, Douglas. Yeah, black plays h6. Great. Now, I want black to play g5, so... Actually, I could just take now, right? That's already going to hurt black's structure. It's going to split their pawns. If black plays h6, I'll take it. I'll take it right away. Yeah. That's just good news for me already. Yeah, Septashwa. We've got our eyes on every tactical means at our disposal. You know, for example, after this h6 move takes here, I was thinking if king takes, I might go check here, and trade this pawn for this pawn to weaken the king. I also considered that in this position, I might try the move rook f4. Note the bishop can't take me at the moment. And I'm just trying to play rook f7. So, yeah. I'm definitely looking for tactics. We're going to need like lots of little mini tactics to push our advantage in a position like this. But I would consider this already a huge accomplishment, Douglas. If we get black to play h6 and we split black's pawns, if they take this way, there are some weaknesses. If they take with the king, there are some weaknesses. I would say, you know, you've already achieved something. So I'm happy with that. I don't know what else black's likely to do here, but I like that we stopped losing our A pawn, so nothing decisive happens. Black has to like do a nice long slog with us now, right? They got to find a lot of tough moves to play this endgame out. I like that we're giving them worries like this where they have to think, you know, do I play h6? Do I play g5? Do I let the pawn go there? Do I trade the pawn? I like that. That's what I like. We're giving the opponent what for me would be a headache if I were black. Because I can imagine, Douglas, I can imagine myself losing this with black. I can imagine Jesse giving me and Kostya this position on Endgame Sensei and Kostya beating me here. So I just want to find the moves for white that I would lose to. That'll give some grief. Yeah, black might themselves start trying to initiate a rook trade. They might. Yeah. Yeah. And then we can trade. And now we've got more freedom because there isn't a second rook that can attack this pawn. So now, you know, if we put this rook here or something, this bishop can't wander because we'll go through a5 to a6 in one step, right? This bishop just has to guard this now forever. The rook can't wander. It's got to stay on this. Now you're looking at scenarios where you could like move your bishop, and if they take the pawn, this goes a5, a6, and the pawn might be gone. So now we have scenarios where we could maybe sack the e-pawn, where before with 2 rooks, we couldn't really do it. So yeah, I mean, rook b4 is probably okay for black, but I still see ways for white to scare black quite a bit here. No, for those of you registering for the tournament, you don't need to enter any special requests. It's just a place where people could say something if they wanted to. You know, it was kind of like a joke. Some people were saying like that they wanted me to like sing a song for them during the tournament. Other people used it to say, you know, what time zone they were in or stuff like that. Yeah. Let's see. So, okay, let's look a little bit more at the game. So here, here, bishop here, defended it from the side, yeah. Tied this up, took here. Right, so why was like bishop c6 not working here? I think it was because of this move, right? Okay, so bishop c6 doesn't work. So here, in this position, why didn't black immediately go bishop b4? That's kind of confusing, right? Because bishop b4 here would just win the pawn by cutting you off. That would be pretty immediate. So this thing just doesn't really work. It leaves the pawn just too hanging. And this is the position where I suggested rook d7, yeah. So the idea is to eventually bring the bishop to c2. Did your opponent have a way to save their piece? Super smart chess player. Tonight, I'm just looking at games from our tournament. So it's just like a little special perk or service for those playing in the tournament. But at other times of the week, I do game analysis of just any random game. And you could send in a game at one of those shows. So, yeah. Good night, Hughes. Hope your stream was good. AFM Hughes, folks, is a dojo regular from some time now. Oh, wait. Hang on. Let me try and do this right. /shoutout AFM Hughes. Nope, that's not right either. Shout out AFM Hughes. There we go. He's recently started streaming some more. And he's also recently raised his rating from 1,700 to 2,000 in 1 week, maybe 10 days. So if you want to follow along with a fellow dojoer and their quest, you can give him a follow. Okay, your plan would be to try and get the bishop to d3, improve on the king side, leave the queen side stuck. Yeah. So it's it is seemingly reasonably awkward for black to try and get out of this. I'm not sure he helped himself by grabbing the pawn if he's just tied up. And in the game, And you can't win the rook with bishop c2 because it always allows, sorry, rook a2, huh? Same as bishop c6 did. Nice. So people can expect a lot of classical on Hughes' channel, it seems, because Hughes is playing these classical tournaments, but also logging like extra training games, like a very, very slow time controls, as you can see, 2 hours plus 30. This game is a lot to figure out. Bishop d3, bishop c2 right there. Okay, I'm okay with bishop d3. So you're saying if he just hides on g7? So should black just be like waiting around here, like rook b6, rook b... Well, black needs a waiting move. Like they need to manufacture a position with a waiting move. King f8, king g7 maybe? Giving up the back rank is perhaps worrisome in some lines. Say like king here, bishop d3, king here. That's right, Daster. It looks like bishop c6 should win a piece, but rook a6, and it never seems to help. So we actually want to keep the piece on a defended square. The king coming out to f6 was risky. I was looking at like bishop c2, rook a2, bishop b3 ideas, and then rook f4 check and coming in. So yeah, safer to just keep the king hidden inside here. So how does white try to win eventually? You're probably going to play king g2, h4, h5, all this kind of stuff. It's almost worse for black than when you were up a pawn, honestly. I think black's in a lot of trouble. I struggle to see what they're ever going to do. If they can't move, I do believe you can eventually create a threat. Also, given that this bishop's like hanging by a tactical thread to where your bishop can attack it. I think it's like huge trouble for black. So I like what you did here. Honestly, this looked really tough for the opponent. Oh, what a maneuver. And then they lost a piece. Why couldn't you do that all along? Like here, 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 here. What's not winning about it? Rook d2? Bishop d6. The king went to d6. Oh, man. So you're just holding the position here, and when he goes to d6, he loses. Oh, man. But so he was starting to run out of, like, places to go in the middle of the board here, huh? Because, I mean, where else is the king supposed to go to mark time? If he goes here, that's got all these risks, right? Okay, but he should definitely stay in the corner. Even if he stays in the corner, I think it's somewhat dangerous. Oh, Eric, you have the idea of like putting the king on g2, rook on b2, and then playing bishop c2? Hitting the rook when it can't attack the bishop or check, huh? That's an idea too, right? Like, even if the king... So even if the king hides in our hiding variation, okay? No, not that one. King f8. Here. Here. Okay, we're going to go here. Here. You're saying if the rook ever goes to b2, which I might do here, bishop d6? No. Can't be done. With the king on g7, could it be done? Would that be the idea? Hang on, let me just see. So I'm going to play a different like waiting move for black here, although black's very low on waiting moves. But let's say I do this. This, does black have this move here? Because now that rook's not defended. If you take here, black's going to try and take this first. Right? This is dead equal. This bishop d6 is the idea. Okay, but that begs the question, like, how does black wait neutrally here without allowing rook b2? This is so tricky, right? I mean, this is really, really so tricky. This rook can't move. This rook could come up and give away the back rank. The king can't go to the back rank because rook b2 wins the piece with the threat of bishop c2. Unless, hang on, king f8, rook b2, king here. Can black do this in this kind of a position? Probably here they could do it too, right? They can move the king back off the back rank and then just play bishop d6. And it just trades the rooks. Okay, so that deals with rook b2. We can always just bring the king back to g7. All right, so here we are. And white's down to h4, h5. Did you prefer, Douglas, the position where you had the a pawn or the position where your opponent was like completely tied up on this bishop on b4? You enjoyed this position better. It's just so hard to beat your opponent. They got to make impossible decisions. You know, like e6 is probably a small concession. There's probably like 100 things that can go wrong. For example, king f8, you could switch your rooks to doubling on the b file. Is that an advantage or not? Does that help you maybe win this? Oh, there's this move maybe? Oh, what a lucky move. There's no bishop d6. I chose to switch when there was rook c8. Right? And once I get my rook here, then you're just done, right? We're just going to play bishop c2 and win. So I was just trying to transfer to this and really crush it. But I think rook a to a8. Now, even if I play bishop e4, the idea is to just move the bishop. I'm going to say this move draws. Okay, so I can't use that trick. But I can play h4, h5 and stuff, right? Let's do it. We haven't pushed them yet. You can definitely ask the opponent a lot of questions with this stuff. Is the position stable with a bishop on e4, by the way? Sorry, before I make all these pawn pushes. I know your bishop came from e4. If the king like stays here, Your bishop's hanging here. If you play like the rook c2 transfer to here. And here this is dangling. I don't know, Eric. I don't know yet whether g5 is good or bad. I don't know that yet. Okay, so we need to get further into our king f8 lines. And we need to try pushing these pawns now, right? It's tricky to place this king. I don't think it's got a lot of options. Oscar's saying maybe we could get the king up to g4. Like with the pawn on g5, bring the king up to g4, then push for moves like h5. Black will have to take at some point. If we play g5 too soon, black may have the defensive resource h5. So, I mean, honestly, maybe like at some point what we're going to do is play h5 here. King here, and then like g5. Now, I have to do this, and then we transfer over here, right? The thing is, even just one rook can sort of make this a bit awkward for black for a moment. I want to take and keep pushing that position. We could play h5 really, yeah, but if we play h5 really early for black, like in a position like this, h5, then it gives us another weakness to attack for white, right? So we trade it. And then I guess come here with this. And this is the idea. Ideally, we can keep the opponent tied down while we win back our pawn, but that might be asking too much here. Tough positions, yeah. So that said, I like the idea of bringing the second rook to the 4th rank instead of this one, keeping this pawn secure. And then I think one big thing that we've learned here, Douglas, is how annoying it can be for black for that h-pawn to get to h5, right? That's like a typical thing you'll see in a lot of GM games, that h-pawn coming up to poke if we get the chance. So, yeah. Quite a game. Good job scraping your way through this one. This was a tricky game. I think it might be surprising to some people how much that endgame depends on all kinds of little tactics, huh? That's not necessarily what you expect of some kind of opposite colored bishop endgame, that it'd be so based on little like tactical things, little finesses, you know, threats to like transfer a rook through a square hitting a piece, and then here, and then a threat here, and stuff like that. Very tricky, right? I mean, the whole way I started to even get an advantage for white in some position was, let's see, like, was based on this, right? The whole way I ever got an advantage for white was I played h4 at a time where black couldn't play h5 because of rook g6, pawn takes, bishop d5. And that allowed me to get the pawn to h5 and start playing. Here, a5 doesn't work for me. I eventually had to come up with transferring this rook back to the 4th rank. And the idea is to come over to h4 and start threatening h6 again. And all this just to finally trade these pawns in a way that splits black's pawns on the king side. But each step of that, your opponent has to think about and labor over and worry about the implications of the different concessions. And ultimately, they're making some concessions. So very, very strenuous for the opponent. Now, next up is Daster, or R Daster, an idle player. So let's try and check results round 2. Also, thanks to everybody in the tournament for doing a good job of posting results here. It's gotten smoother as we get into round 2. All right, so here's Daster's game as black. And let us know, Daster, what question or questions you have about this game. Big question, what happens if white takes on e6? I mean, white's development's terrible. It's not a great time to go pawn hunting, but it's a question. Nice. Nice. Good. Okay, crazy times. Ooh la la. It's a big question here. Suppose you're just going to move the knight and trade queens. Oh. Wow, fancy, fancy. Wow. That was intense. That was intense. Man, oh man. Oh. Oh, this was intense all the way through. Your queen b6 move fails. Here. Is it because of bishop d4 and it's hard to untangle these? I don't think my first queen d4 move is like crushing if you just play something like this and trade queens. Right, he trades, which doesn't feel right here. Yeah, this move definitely feels wrong. You're saying white has knight to g4, which you didn't see coming. Yeah, that's quite a move. I don't even know what the point is right here. It's tricky. Oh my goodness, it's check because of knight h5. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's quite a move to see deep into like a very, very difficult game, but would be a good instinct for white to not want to play queen takes knight and look for any other move here. Well, I'm guessing at the point, Daster. I mean, I'm not a computer, and I'm not like in flow, and I'm not spending a long time on this. But definitely my instinct would be not to play queen takes knight for white here, right? Looking at this position, after queen takes knight, queen e5, black's queen's hitting all these pawns, doesn't feel right. And this knight here, I can see it's a little bit suffering. I guess it was sort of threatening knight e3. That's what I didn't take into account too well myself. Because I was thinking, you know, can we throw in this pawn trade with the pawn that's almost dead? But now I realize on knight e3, the king has to go somewhere bad. And black can take this knight for free. And whatever white does with this, I mean, white's still down this knight and this pawn's coming through. So it's not... Actually, you don't have a lot of good moves here. Maybe knight g4 is the only good one. Awesome, Bing Poker. Welcome. Glad you're here. Every cool tactic you found is a mistake. That's funny. I mean, I guess it's a question if white has any good move other than knight g4, because that knight e3 move looks surprisingly strong, one could say. I don't see anything for white other than knight g4 right now, Daster. So that would explain why, I mean, he eventually played queen f1. Because, I mean, your instinct's not to play queen f1, but if you can't find knight g4, then I don't know what we're doing. Knight e3 is really strong. There's a suggestion of knight f7, and, you know, if king takes queen e6, that's super interesting. But perhaps black does the same, knight e3 check. King. Actually, if king here, queen e4 is mate. So I guess I'll go here. And then king takes, right? And the knight is just holding this queen down, actually. And there's all these checkmate ideas on top of it. And the passed c pawn. So white's probably just lost. Yeah, I mean, if you can't understand it, then it's kind of irrelevant for you, Daster. Wow. So knight f1's a mistake because you could have played queen f1 and gone for a pure endgame, right? No, king takes, and then they're up a knight. Wait, what were you supposed to do here? You said knight f1's a mistake? What else were you supposed to do here? Knight f1's a blunder? I don't see any other move. Knight f1, queen f1. Queen f1's just down a piece. Right, you'd just be down a knight for nothing. I do, Eric. I do. I played Duck Hunt. Okay, I don't see what else you're supposed to do, Daster. Calling knight f1 a blunder. I don't see any move for black here. Maybe I should close my eyes for a second again. Look away from my screen. Thank goodness I'm not streaming tomorrow. I'm just always staring at the screen lately. Yeah, the screen's staring at me too. Over here. I don't see anything for you to do here. Other than take or take. I mean, you're down a rook on the board if you don't take it. White's pieces are all in position. Yeah, and your queen's attacked. And your knight's attacked. Nothing else to do. So if there was a mistake, it was earlier than this somehow. This is pretty sick. If you go knight g3, just queen takes, and the bishop defends the queen through here. I don't see anything else for you to do, really. Yeah, maybe this bishop sack doesn't quite work. It's genius. I mean, I appreciate that you went for genius. Maybe this is heresy, but you could also consider f5. Because then your opponent can't deal with the knight. And you can put the bishop on this diagonal. The fact is, your dark squares are already kind of like trashy. And at least this way, if your opponent like aims at them, your queen and rook can defend squares along like the second rank. What was the threat after bishop f5? Well, what happened in the game metabolic error was that white played g4. And then he sacked the bishop rather than retreated and sacked the knight. Yeah, I mean, he wanted to bring all the pieces. He tried to make it all work. I mean, this is like exactly how I try to play chess, right? Like, he tries to make it work to bring out his bishop and rook, go for knight to g3. But it seems like after bishop e5, the calculation just doesn't quite work. What happens here on queen e5, Daster? That's one move we haven't looked at yet. This move holds some hope for you. Compare that knight takes f1 line. Yeah, I think your mistake was knight g3 check. This I was thinking during the game is what I was expecting from you. And then when you played knight g3, I was like, oh my god, it's so much fancy stuff still. Just down the exchange and you don't like it. Well, hang on. Right now, you've got a knight and a pawn against a rook. That's not necessarily a losing proposition. Right now, you're threatening pawn takes pawn and queen takes pawn. There's a very good chance you can anchor the knight here with your f-pawn, even if the opponent trades and you have to just take back. Very good chance you can anchor that knight. If this knight gets anchored here with a c-pawn on c3 defended by it, and an f5 pawn defending the knight, you may have like a strength of construction here in the center that white can't play around. Oh, it's not an endgame or rook down, right? This is like the equivalent of being down a pawn maybe, but I mean, you have to just assess the value of the knight. The passed c-pawn's been there for black for a long time. Yeah, and that's what we're talking about, Far Eastern. This is fluctuating piece values for sure. Yeah, Dastra, I don't see anything for white to do. Try and go here. Well, we don't know for sure yet, Metabolic. Here there's a pretty serious threat of some kind of like knight discovery. If queen d1, then knight f2 is double check and takes the queen. So it probably makes the king move. I mean, not only could I take this pawn and then I've got knight and 2 pawns against a rook, and white's running out of pawns to win the game with, but I could just check and repeat this situation kind of like this, maybe. Queen g5 also repeating because the king can't get out here. If king here, just check. Check. Check and take. Check. Oh man. This is the real culprit, Daster. Queen takes e5, f6, queen e5, and I want white to be able to play queen h4, but can't quite make it work. Okay, Eric's saying here he wants to play f6. Right, we can't take because our queen's hanging. Queen d5, and he wants to play queen h4, going for mate. If king goes here, queen h1 check, so we can take everything with check and win the game. And if king here, then knight takes his check. So that's why you can't play queen h4, right, Eric? Knight g3. Yeah, I mean, f6 is also interesting to try because white might need that pawn on the board to do something. And in my version with fg, black can always anchor the knight, and white's just running out of pieces with which to win the game. But as you say, f6, queen d5, white needs something concrete to get the king out of this issue. Maybe insane rook f3. No, knight f6 covering queen e8 mate. And the rook can't take because it's pinned. Yeah, so white needs something pretty good here. We could try d6 as well. I tried it with the pawn trade in. We could try d6 right away here. I think I'd probably still play the same queen d5 move here, because otherwise that d6 pawn's getting too dangerous. So let's say I play the same queen d5 move, right? And white's got to do something about this. Well, maybe here. This is tricky. This is tricky. Maybe the knight just has to retreat and go capture the pawn with the knight. Because if I do this, I'm not sure about this move. If I go take the rook, there's this move. So I'm going to do like really stupid looking, just retreat, here and take it. And say, why should white be better? With their king so open and almost no pawns left to work with. Queen e8. King here. Queen's covering this, luckily. f6, we'll just take it. And remember that if we're willing to draw, we can just start raining checks on white at some point, since the king's not really covered. It'd be very hard for white to win this with the king this exposed. I'll say that. Like, to not have the game end in a draw somehow with so few pawns for white. So maybe this is all brilliant, Daster, up to this move. Yeah, just take now instead of going for the rook. Wow. Yeah, it's 10 minutes till midnight for me, Jaspers. Yeah. Yeah, exciting game, Daster. I like how you reacted aggressively in the opening, whether or not it exactly works. It seems right. To do it. This looks right. This looks right. What other options do you have here? I don't like a6. I'm considering knight c5. That's to avoid sacks followed by f5 or bishop f5. Just castle, and white gave up their really good bishop, but it seems like this pawn structure is unchallengeable for black. I think black just sort of loses to that structure there. This seems right. This seems right. Here I was thinking maybe knight f6 to challenge this pawn. Since your bishop can't seem to get out without trading here, you might as well win this. When you do. That's one thought in this phase. If you just retreat your rook, then white castles and you're down a pawn. I don't know, Daster. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. If you do this, this, this. Seems like white's pretty good. I think what you did looks right, actually. up to here. I think here this queen a5 ends up being a lost tempo, right? The opponent defends it. You move the queen again pretty soon, if I remember how the game went. So maybe here you just want to start bringing out the knight and bishop like this way, right? Like what you did like after moving the queen twice. Eric, you're saying here for white castle instead of playing like knight takes rook or anything like that? Also, if white castles... Yeah, no, I mean... It's got to be right to capture a whole rook. Or to play queen takes b2, rook e3, king f2 would be the other big candidate move. You can play this as white too, right? And bring the rooks out quickly. This actually looks really, really dangerous for black as well, right here. Oh man, I gotta speed up. My eyes are dying. Yeah, queen a5 because you remember it being something somewhere. Only if it's actually good in the actual position you're looking at. Time is important for both players here. This is a very sharp position. I feel like you played this correctly. I feel like somehow or other this is correct play. Yeah. Feels mostly correct, Aster. And I play this kind of stuff again. No, I'm not telling you to never play queen a5 either. No! Not telling you to never play queen a5 or anything. Okay, you're just playing with me. You'll play it when it's the best move. Now we're all in agreement on this. All right. So I think you had very, very good instincts for how to handle this opening, Daster. I mean, overall, it's a very, very exciting game. You really saw your opportunities. You felt when you needed to play aggressively. Two main considerations for you, right? One is that this queen a5 is kind of like wasted. Okay, we should probably just start developing these pieces here. The other one is maybe this idea of f5, bishop b7. And then finally in this line here, yeah, just taking it with just taking it. And actually you can make sense of your whole game even here. It's quite a great game. Quite a great game. I mean, and also for such a complexity level, you know. I mean, obviously you guys missed like one or two like exciting moves later on in the game. But it was super complex, so you could have been pretty tired by that point. All right. All right, I'm going to be fading a little bit here. So I've got Idle Player and Bink who want their games looked at. Bink is Shady versus I Need Time. It's over here. Try and take like a quicker look at one or another of these games. Yeah, there'll be a VOD, Daster. Nargave can check it out. All right. Tell me, Bink. Looks like white's coming out ahead a bit here. Nice. Nice, Bink. All right. Were you white or black? And what are your questions? I'll grab some water. Howdy, Vaziamand. You prepared queen c6 versus the London, followed by a6 after knight f3. You're expecting knight f3, a6 here? It didn't occur, and then you didn't know how to evaluate the position that you had. Once your opponent played this move, you just didn't know how to evaluate what was going on. How to proceed if you trade pawns and trade queens, or he trades queens. Yeah. Well, I'll say one thing, Bink. The queen trade in these positions is something you need to know about if you play queen b6 at an idea level, not at a preparation level. I don't really understand the point behind a6. If white played knight f3, you wanted to play a6. I don't know what the point of that move is. Can you explain in words the point of that move, or what was the basis of your preparation? You're not that new. If you're rated, if you're rated 1600, you're doing pretty good. It was in an Agad Mator Vodio versus London. Yes, but can you explain the idea behind it? I gotta say, it looks terrible. But even if it didn't look terrible, even if it looked great, I'd love to know, like, what are you playing for? Why do you think this is good? What do you want? The plan is to put the queen on a7 to pressure d4. After a white knight comes to a4. That still makes no sense, Bink. Does that make sense to you? I don't mean this at all in like a mean way or anything, just figuring my way through it with you. Does that make sense to you that your plan is to tuck the queen on a7 to pressure this d4 square, which doesn't look like it's under pressure because of white knight coming to a4, which doesn't look like it's coming to a4? Usually c3 hasn't been played, but knight c3. Oh. So a6 maybe makes sense in a position with the knight on c3, but not in a position with the knight on b1? It doesn't really make sense. Yeah. Okay, just checking if it's only me. Okay. Also, in this position, you don't have pressure on d4, right? This pawn's easily covered by e3, knight f3, c3. You can't break through d4, folks. If you guys want to like crush the London system by breaking the d4 square, somebody's selling you a bridge, because that square is solid. That square can't really be pressured. The point of this move is to sort of like win a tempo on b2, force some kind of small concession out of white when they bring the bishop out so early. Okay, so queen b3 is played. We have to figure out how to evaluate that. Had white played knight f3 here, I mean, you should just take the pawn. Not play a6. I mean, the point of queen b6 is that you're attacking this pawn. So if they played knight f3, I think you should just take it. And if you don't want to take it, which you might not want to, I'm not saying that it's awesome to like just move your queen for the whole game. If you don't want to take it, then you shouldn't have played queen b6 if you weren't willing to take it, right? Okay, so queen b3. This is like a theme that if you're going to be playing queen b6s, you have to know, who the trade favors on b3 or b6. It's always going to be a trade-off between doubled pawns and an open file. So let's say he played queen b3, you've got the first option to take. Let's show this, right? White's got the open file, but white has doubled pawns. The pawns could become a weakness at some point. The a file could become an asset. That's the trade-off. So anytime you're considering trading on b3 or allowing your opponent to trade on b6, because you could do either. You could play here, looking to play pawn takes pawn, queen takes d4. And maybe you're expecting that then your opponent will trade and go here. And again, you have to consider the doubled pawns versus the file. So whether it's for you or for your opponent, right, you have to consider this trade-off. Is the file going to be better or not? Are the doubled pawns going to be better or not? Often it comes down to whether or not the pawns are able to push further forward. In general, when you've got doubled pawns, if they lag way behind the other pawns, they're weaker. And if they can get in front of their neighboring pawns, they're less weak. So a question is going to be whether or not this pawn is able to advance. It's going to be a big question in a lot of these positions. Additionally, if these pawns are traded, it's going to make these pawns weaker by isolating them. So in this position here where you played knight c6, I'm just going to guess that you should have traded on d4 because it leaves the pawns isolated. Now they can't advance and nobody can protect them. So here now you can play knight c6, kind of like in the game. And let's say white plays e3 like in the game, or knight f3 could be played as well. You get this position here. Now I would say these pawns are not very good. I don't think that the a file is good enough to compensate for them in this case. Because black easily controls the b4 square. You've also got the bishop, which can help you do it. And to me, these pawns are just weak. Your development's good too, right? You got the knights out nice and quick. So now d5 for you. You could. Or you could play d6 to block their bishop. You could play any configuration you want. d5 and e6. d6 and bring out the bishop to e6 or f5. e5. You got lots of options here. That should be fine. Probably d5 is the simplest and bishop f5, e6, because that way your bishop's covering this. And their bishop will probably mostly shoot into thin air and it's not a problem. Play d6 when you want to really block this piece. Similarly, had you played c takes d4 yourself, as white, I would trade your queen and then take here, because I'm giving you these doubled isolated pawns that I think I can have a good chance to play against as white. But if this happens, Black should probably try this right away, rushing the pawn forward before it can get stuck on b6, right? You can get it this far. You then defend it with this bishop and this knight. And actually here, it looks like you make something out of your A file by getting this pawn further forward. I think this position looks okay-ish for black, despite the double isolated pawns. Yeah. Rush the pawn past b5 before white controls that square. And my other example that I gave was cd4, cd4. Yeah, it's black's move, and black takes away the square before white could push, right? Knight c6. So that's what's going on when the queens oppose each other. You guys are looking at the scenario of one player or the other getting those doubled pawns. And if you do, it's going to be really important whether or not the pawns are able to advance much. Here at some point, black will be able to play a6. And then this rook's pressure will be mitigated. It won't disappear, but it'll be less, right? Because you have a pawn that's defended by a pawn blocking the file. But if this pawn could get to b5, like in the other position I showed you, then there's not going to be as simple a way of keeping this pawn defended. So this rook is going to have more of an influence than in the other position I showed. Okay. So, so here, knight c6. Yeah, it's very, very bad that you let the opponent take this pawn, I think. Right? Even here after knight c6, your opponent played e3, but seems like they could probably take this, right? The thing about this is it makes good use of their doubled b pawns, right? They're perfectly prepared with the c pawn to support this extra pawn. Now, how do you ever bring this bishop out without playing b6 or d6 and trading this pawn? So, but, I mean, right? Like, I try to win this pawn back b4. But if b6, you know, there's problems like this. And d6 is also hard to play with the white bishop here. Okay. Eric's saying, would this have been a problem? Rook takes. Are you trying to trade the a pawn for this pawn here? Or I don't know if this is like a problem for black. This might be like a good try for white to keep things from going worse. Yeah, good option for white. Yeah, that's fair. I think this is maybe a better thing for white to try than accepting like how bad this position is, right? But that said, white's trading their developed piece for the undeveloped piece and then probably doing this next, right? And as black, I'll probably play this slightly surprising move to you based on development. If I take, I'm letting white develop the knight. Although, if I take and the knight takes, I mean, that is doubled isolated pawns and I have the bishop pair. I don't know that I need anything better than that. But anyway, here's my crazy move. e5, defending d4. I guess knight here sort of deals with it. But my idea is like that white's dark squares are not that good. Try like this. I'm taking on some risk as black by playing this way. Some risk. But I still think I'm better with the bishop pair here. Basically, I mean, I'm saying I'm completely happy with e5. I'm saying I'm happy to play with double isolated pawns myself, just because it's going to hurt this knight and this bishop gets access to, you know, weaknesses of white's, and black's development is going to be a bit faster. But I don't know, it's a little bit risky way to play. And there is nothing wrong with playing more simply here. In this position here, just trading on c3. It just can't be bad for black, so. So that's less risky, I guess. Oh, Marco, you could take away the colors from the squares. I would still know which bishops are my dark squared and light squared bishops. Nagel 5000. Do you know about the classical tournament? Are you in it? All the info's in that spreadsheet if you're interested. This looks quite good for black. Plausible. But as soon as you play this as white, I would grab this pawn. I guess the idea was here. I think somebody was asking about this in chat, right? Like trying to win back the pawn. Maybe that's why your opponent didn't do it right away. That could be plausible. B4 takes here. Now, how to break open the dark squares. There could be G6, bishop H6, or there could just be D6, trying to open some diagonals in the center. White's got a really bad pawn structure and really bad dark squares for the whole game that can't really be repaired. You were very lost in the game after he took the C5 pawn. Yes, I agree. But also notice, Blink, that even if you realize that it's not acceptable to sack this pawn and trade it at this point, white would take with the E pawn, not the C pawn now. This C3 pawn maintains control of the squares that'll help these B pawns to be useful. And this position here is not really bad looking for white compared to the ones with CD4, CD4. Now, you were probably with Queen B6 looking to spice up the game against the London, and you didn't want like a symmetrical Slav kind of pawn structure. You're probably not a huge fan of early on playing like CD4, CD4. You probably think like that's not the kind of game you're looking for. But it's very important. Bringing this pawn away from these, leaving them without a neighbor, is a huge step towards weakening them. Okay? It may not be your style, but this is like positionally a big achievement for you, and you should be happy to play this position. It's not going to be boring. You've got lots of good stuff to do. It's just positionally correct. That's that's all it is. But you didn't like that, so you kind of like weren't really considering CD4. But I can tell you by this point, if you ever play CD4, your opponent's going to take with the E pawn, and the C pawn helping these two out is going to mean you don't have an advantage for black. It's going to be basically like equal. Whereas if you've done CD4 aggressively early on, I prefer black's position, even though it's already only on move like 4 or 5. So I think it's a mistake some people make, trying like too hard to like spice things up or change the style of the game, or think this is my strength or weakness, my opponent's strength or weakness, when the position's like demanding that you play a certain way. Equal is fine. No, it is. Wouldn't you rather have the advantage? I mean, basically, like what you're trying to say is like, I'd rather it be like equal but more interesting than like I have an advantage and it's sort of more boring. But I would argue that having the advantage is inherently interesting for any player who's interested in winning, you know? So, so based on that, you know, when I see this position here, the possibility of giving the isolated pawns with the, you know, when I can double those isolated pawns and get control of B4, that's what's interesting to me, you know? So just having an advantage, that's already interesting to me. And you know, there's no way that the white player wanted this position either. You know, this whoever played this as white, I mean, they didn't want to play this position. They weren't looking for it either. I know they played this like C3 move where, you know, you probably expected E3 and you thought like, oh gosh, they're probably some boring player who like wants like the exchange Slav position. They don't even want this position here. So you're kind of like pigeonholing them like that. But I mean, once you know like the themes and ideas, I mean, you can see that this is probably giving you an advantage to give them these double isolated pawns. That'll give you the point to hook into and find your interest in the game. Where's the limit between aggressive and crazy? That's a good question, Marco. I think the Latvian School of Chess has often really danced along the edge of that point where aggressive becomes crazy. So I can see where you get that from. I know that's like the school that you're sort of partially adopted into, right? Even though you're in Croatia, thanks to our tours, you're a little bit of a Latvian school influence on you. But it's a hard question to say. I mean, one place you could think is like, when are you playing moves that like you don't even think are best? That could be like one question about when you're crossing a line into crazy, right? Because as long as like you believe your moves are right and you're seeking complications, that's one thing. But like this game here, I Need Time was letting some of those, or Bink Poker was letting some of those sort of like preferences trump maybe even like the evaluation. That said, Bink Poker wasn't really sure what the evaluation was, so that was a hard thing to work with when you don't even know the evaluation. But you could see like the striving for the kind of position that they wanted. We really have to ask ourselves, like, what was Black's plan if White took this pawn, right? Like, at what point did Black like have a plan, and at what point was Black just sort of like hoping that White wouldn't take the pawn, or hoping that they would have something if White took the pawn, right? That's where you sort of could maybe consider that you're crossing into from like aggressive into crazy, when like you're like offering pawn sacks that are like bluffs, like it's not good, you don't believe in it, you wouldn't want to repeat it. I don't know. But that's just one theory. I mean, it's an interesting question I have not really thought about before you asked it, Marco. Most of these questions I've sort of like at least thought about them once before. Helps me to answer. All right. You're welcome, Bink, and we're going to see if I have it in me to look at a bit of Idle Player's game with them, which Oscar Idle has been very, very patient here today. I even had you jump the queue on Idle Player. It's perhaps rude of me, but I was afraid that Idle Player's game was going to be too complicated for me. And I was hoping your game would be a little less complicated for me. All right, here we go. All right, Idle's going to help me out at least. Will Dojo be live in 1 hour, 30 minutes or not? I doubt it, Marco. That'll be 5 a.m. for Jesse. I don't think he usually streams that early. And there's going to be nothing left of me in half an hour for sure. All right, 17 moves theory, and you know that much theory, I'll just skip it with you. May you announce for another stream? Absolutely, Marco. Yeah, no problem advertising something else on our stream. It's not like a cutthroat competition here with Dojo. If there's a better stream out there for people to watch, even if I'm live, you can advertise it. When does Jesse start streaming? I think Jesse may start streaming at like maybe 6:37 Eastern, like pretty early. I mean, definitely when I'm asleep. Someone else probably knows better. A 1-year celebration. Oh. Starts in 1 hour and 30 minutes. So let's just shout out his channel, Marco, okay? GM Naxons. You know, if we're not the best channel for somebody, then that's fine. We don't need to like keep them here because they don't know about something better. You know, that's fine. They can be here if they like it. Hey, Biology Prank, welcome. This is surely the last game I'm going to look at tonight. I'm on the blink. But yeah, that's awesome. Naxon's been doing this shtick about the same length as us, huh, Marco? We just had our 1 month, our 1 year celebration a month ago. Okay, so this much theory. What do you want to point me towards, Idle Player? I'm gonna do a quick playthrough just so I can see what happened. I saw all these night twirls. Got surprised by this. To grab the pawn, I guess. I mean, your position still certainly makes sense. Definitely don't want to trade queens. Looking at bishop f1, d3. So she defends queen h7, checkmate in advance. You take back over this. Defend c5 a lot. I guess black's position looks kind of tough. Threatening, maybe knight takes f7. Defends g6. Hanging around. Hanging around. Trying to trade the knight on b3 to do something. Gain some space. Knight here. Tactical squabbling. Trade. Queen here. Hitting the bishop and maybe bishop takes g6. Comes back. Takes here anyway. Takes, queen takes, king h8, f7, threatening mate, bishop g7, queen h5 is sound. Queen trade, and then just pop back. Complicated stuff still. 2 pawns and the bishop pair versus the rook. Grabbing a pawn. Wow. Working it. I do like the way you work it, Idle Player. Back rank mate. Oh, vicious. What? Why no defending this pawn? Oh my lord, that's vicious. Oh, and she took it. And you're just winning. Yeah. I see the tactic on the c6 pawn. I can see that. Even in my bleary-eyed state, I can see that in 5 seconds. Oh, Thierry, I'd be allowed to comment their match on our channel? Sorry, I just missed a bunch of chats here. Average, the approximate ratings, Bink Poker. White is like 2100 and black like 2250. This is very, very strong. And I didn't see your message, Thierry. I've got a lot of unread messages on Discord today. April 22nd. April 22nd is Thursday. I'll be back from my little break. I'm gonna be offline for like 3 days on a beach near here. F4 is like a main mistake. No, I'm in California, Taylor. Do I have a 6 p.m. curfew? No. That said, I haven't really gone out for like a year. No, I haven't done anything in a year really. I don't know if I've left like my town in the last year, and I'm going to go to like a beach an hour away and with my family. Yeah, I do speak French. I went to a French school from a very young age. Okay. Okay, so F4, no bueno, huh? I mean, it is hard to say what's going to happen, but F4 allows C5. Do you have a move that doesn't allow C5 here? Oh, I guessed right. Yeah, queen b5. Now on queen b5, we would need like a square here. Unless you're going to sack and exchange and then play e5. Yeah, you're probably going to do that. I'll just assume that's what you're going to do. I'll just assume. It even seems to work. I don't know. Like here, here, here. Yeah. Got everything covered, I guess. I'm not sure what else we would do after queen b5, bishop a6. But I think it sort of works. Okay, so queen b5 would be like an alternative for you here, I suppose. What's your plan if you go queen b5 and black doesn't go in for tactics? Who knows? I mean, one part of your plan is that you've got sort of like a simple tactical threat, maybe. Well, does it even work? Yeah, you're kind of threatening some version of e5. In this position. You're sort of pseudo-threatening e5 already, I think. Let's just play king f8 to see. Well, no, king f8 changes the position a little bit. Okay, I'm going to play this. But not really, but... Okay, so idea is on bishop takes, pawn takes, and 3 pieces are hanging, so you're going to come out ahead a piece. Right? And if the knight moves, you've got queen d7. I suppose there could be like a move like c6 from the opponent, but that's just good news for you, right? And we don't need to get too deep into the fact that that's good for you to bury the bishop. I guess it's coming back out, though. So I guess I'm not even sure if you're threatening e5. I guess I'm not even sure. Okay. Knight a5, knight b3. Your knight's coming from a5. Yeah, queen b5. I don't know. What's black going to do? c5 takes. c6 back here. Rook takes e5. I mean, black also does have to play some kind of a move. If this knight moves, you can come into c5 probably pretty soon. I mean, you'd probably have to trade once, play rook a1, and then bring this knight to c5 or something. But that's great. I'm glad you're learning so much from me, Daster. You're learning how to drive people crazy with humor. That's a much better lesson from me than any chess X and O. How to just calmly, quietly, with a straight face, mess with everybody. No, that's good. That's good. It's what I do, so it's only fair. I mean, black does also have to find a move here, right, Idol? Like, they have to move something. You know, this rook's defending c7, queen's defending the rook. You know, rook a1, queen b8's not lovely. They do have to find something to move, and that's not proving too easy here. So the thing on king h8, yeah, it could be done. I didn't go to f8 because of pawn takes knight, pawn takes bishop check. We could try this. We could. And then would you ever consider this? He knows that, Marco. He's just messing with me. I'm assuming black would want to trade on d5. Letting white take on e6 looks bad for the structure. And playing e5 for black sort of concedes an amazing queenside advantage for white with that d5 pawn. So I assume black would want to like take, but I didn't really calculate c6 before I played this, I'll admit. Good thing it just doesn't work. c6 loses material. There's just a bunch of captures and the rook on a7 hangs at the end. Okay, so takes, right? I'm just going to take. If takes with the bishop or the knight, I play rook a7 and win a piece. I think. Not even sure it works. It works. I got a little bit lucky. I hadn't calculated everything. And again, the computer may say it doesn't work, but... So, we get this pawn on d5. Does this help us? Or is it a target? I mean, we worked hard to get it there. Okay, other idea. Other idea, actually. Hang on. This is like a... I was going to do this, but there's just knight e5. Okay, e5. I think I'm not going to do that yet, Idle. I think that's giving the opponent some hope. Okay, I'm going to do this. I am going to play this position here for now. Okay, hang on. So, my idea is now, okay? One idea is to play knight a5 to c6 at some point, right? Plop it in there with this bishop's influence, right? Another idea is going to be to switch to bishop h3 and skewer this stuff. That's probably like a threat right here if it were white's move again. Just play bishop h3. And black would just say, oops. And another idea for white might be to go knight c4, knight e3. Defend the space of this pawn. Introduce the bishop to b4, and the knight can go to f5 when it's time to attack the king side. You can switch to a king side attack here very quickly once your pieces are in the right position, but this knight needs to be here. Okay. This is not something I know very well, Oscar. It's a lot of work for me to find these things here, but it feels like a bit of a threat here from white. After e5. You mean if I play e5 here instead of d5 after king h8? I don't think we had a clear verdict on it. I wasn't sure that it works. First of all, to do it, I think you might have to play rook a7 first. Well, okay, whatever. We'll try it like this, just for variety's sake. Looks like it wins. Looks like it wins right here. Hang on. I think the move I wasn't sure about was c6 here, if I remember it right. If I remember it right, that variation I calculated as winning for white, but c6 I wasn't sure because I was like, ooh, we buried the bishop, and then I said, oh, but it can reemerge. Oh, I just don't know. I think that's about as far as we got. Okay, I don't know if the thing I talked about was a pin or a skewer that Taylor's asking about either. But if we were to go back to that position, where's that one? D5, E5, E5 here. It's attacking this piece and this piece on the same line. I think in chess, a skewer is when you attack a more expensive piece and it moves away, and then there's another piece behind it that you take, so it's not a skewer. But to me, it was just like, you're sticking two things on your pointy thing. I was thinking like a layman rather than a chess lingo person. Ja, Raphael, ganz bald schlafe ich, ja. Oh, you've got an idea to deal with this c6 thing, huh? We trade here. And you just won the game. You just won the game. So e5 might be really strong here. E5 might win the game for you, Oscar. Yeah, I mean, if you dealt with c6, I think we dealt with bishop g2. I mean, rook a1 only leaves more things hanging. So black's under a lot of pressure after this queen b5 move. Tough position for black. They might have to preemptively play c6 here, because I don't really know what else is like keeping white at bay. We don't really have many moves. They could play c6 and then trying to bring the bishop back out to a6 and b5, right? Bishop a6 to b5. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe you get them to play c6. You come back here. They play here. You know. Put the queen somewhere over here. Black does this. And the game goes on for another million moves, right? Vaziamandziak. Depends what zone you're in, but yes, there will be a chess tournament in 9 hours. A rapid tournament. c6, maybe you want the endgame. You don't like letting the bishop out. I mean, the bishop got out, but it's still a little bit limited. In this position, you can attack the king. No interest? All right. We'll let you do it the way you want it. c6. You're going to trade, and come here. Okay. He's going to go to the A file. He's not going to like trade and bring your knight in. He's going to go to the A file. I mean, she's Comrade Eyelash. Your opponent. She's going to go here. Lots of weaknesses in black's position, you think. If you can stop c5. Yeah, you've got some edge. Maybe you go knight c4 here. As long as you don't get your queen trapped by queen b8. Which I think we do, right? So maybe you do this, and keep playing here. I guess you've got an edge. It's still a lot of work. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I think even rook a1 maybe gets our queen trapped by this same like stupid retreat. I don't know, maybe you guys see something different than me, but like no. And if queen here, I was thinking like of this move. I guess the queen can come out. But maybe black plays the stupid queen b8 move again and you trade into the endgame. I don't know. Maybe we can make this work finally. I'm not sure. It looks like it's an edge for you, Idol. It's probably, and I'm just guessing here, it's probably a question of taste. Whether at this point you want to, whether in the face of c6, whether you want to trade and go queen a5 or just drop the queen back and play on the king side. Because with this hook here, you know, you've got this plan of g4, h4, g5. It's a standard plan when everything's like locked down and their bishop on b5 defends c6, but you know, they're not threatening this c5 break anymore. And you can just launch a kingside attack if you want to. I mean, this is an option as well. You can play here. And good morning, Stefano. Please don't ask me to look at your game now. I'm terrified of being tricked into staying up later. Your reasoning behind f4 is c5, bishop f2. Okay, we're going to look at the move you actually played in the game. We'll just say you've got two different ways to play that position. So your idea was on c5, you would play bishop f2, starting to hit this, and the pawn can't come to c4 because you'll take it. You're threatening to win the pawn. If they trade, you take with the bishop, hitting this, and now you hope this would be good for you. But honestly, even this, I'm not convinced is good for you. I understand there's like a danger in rook a1 maybe, but there's also rook c1, right? I guess then you just go to c1, rook a2, and just keep playing. Okay, I could see how this might be an advantage for you. I could see how you might like this. I think it's like a little bit of a mild advantage, honestly. I mean, you may have looked into it more than me, but I feel like the advantage is maybe a bit mild because with two mutually open files, it's so different than like the semi-open files. Like, I don't even want the pawn on f4. I just want it back on f2 here. It's hard to me. It's hard to do much in this kind of a position here because the center becomes so open. It's like, are we going to attack the king? What are we trying to do? I don't really know what my scenario is for white of what I'm going for. But then, as you say, you hadn't earlier on planned for knight g4, and then when you saw it here, then you really had to wonder what might happen to your d4 square and e3 square. So you backed out. You went for e5 instead. Knight came in. Now you come here. Again, opponent could trade. You'd play bishop d4. It looks like maybe a minimal advantage for white, but basically a tenable game. Black played bishop a6, and now you trade and get the pawn. And now I understand now why you did this exchange, Zach. I mean, your position was coming apart in a sense, like not like the falling apart like you've like at the end when someone's taken your position apart, but like you weren't like you'd lost the bind that you wanted, and your opponent was gaining the breathing space they needed to kind of like equalize the game. And you're able to lock it back up and keep a lot of tension for a long time. And you've got plenty of chances in this position. So yeah, here this is interesting. I totally get that. Idle player, which side were you on in the crazy game that was like an end game where black basically won with like a black was down a knight and had like a B and a C pawn coming down, and white had like an F pawn and an extra knight on the king side? Were you the black player with the epic win, or the white player who thought for 40 minutes about where to move the knight and couldn't find any way to stop the pawn? You won that one. Okay, so you're no stranger to like exciting games. Is that like consistent with your style, that like when it gets more complicated, you're even more interested in finding the amazing moves? That game was like made me think of like La Bourdonnais, McDonald and stuff. Maybe it's also your avatar on chess.com made me think of that, right? You've got like someone who this picture looks like a real like old school gentleman. So the problem with f4 was just concrete. It was just that there was this c5 move, and we've now discovered that queen b5 was amazing. We've just kicked one single move to death here in this game, and it's revealed a lot for us about this thing. Yeah. And now for everybody watching, you guys can think like, when I talk about analyzing your games, and I did a video on what like 14 to 1600 players should look at in their games, right? And it was just find one single like mistake and like look at one alternative to it, right? Because people are always trying to analyze like, every move of the entire game, right? And the scope is just like impossible. Look what we just did on one move. And this is like, this is a game being played at like a 21 to 2200 level. And all of what we just did, just to understand one choice on one move at one point in the game. And that's it. And you don't need to work through every single move of a game to have learned something from it, right? What we just did here was like a good work, right? Oscar and I each learned something. So. And thank goodness, I feel like I'm going to be able to go to bed without leaving somebody like in the chat who's like, I waited 5 hours for you to look at my game and then you didn't get to it. That's like the thing that keeps me up. It's like not wanting to have that one person who thinks that I hated them and avoided their game or made their life incomplete. Didn't love them as much as I loved some other anonymous person who I didn't know either. All right, cool. So that's our show for tonight. Let's see who's up at this hour to raid right now. Danya, maybe at 4 a.m. Poor guy. Chat and Chill from Chess Bra. Just some blitz chess. Just some blitz chess. Blitz chess. Help us get followers. Tired but streaming. No, go to bed. No. I don't know. Looks like everybody's just playing blitz chess, you know? I don't know. All right, take care, everybody. I will see you soon/later. Actually, I'm taking a little bit of a break, but Coasty and Jesse will be on tomorrow. I think there'll be yeah, maybe I'll pop in before I leave and say bye, but I'm gonna be gone for a couple days. So be well, everybody, and I'll see you soon.
Course on the most important